Okay, hi, gang. I think I'm live. We are about 5 minutes early, but I wanted to say hey before everyone get here, okay? I'm wearing my American hoodie, okay? I'm excited. Look, can I just say, I am very, very pleased with how the Lex and Zelenskyy interview went. I'm excited to discuss it, and we have some great guests coming in to discuss it today. We got Ukrainian Ana. She's been on my show before. She's a treat, okay? We have Andrew Mercado, who's been on the ground doing journalism there, as well as Dylan Burns, the same, right? All good guests, all extensively, I would say they have very good knowledge on the conflict and on the area and on the subjects being described and talked about within the video. You know what? I should, since we're here, okay, one of the things I should update my video on, okay, is I need to put a link, and I'll do that right now. I'm going to put a link to the video itself. The video itself. That's only polite, right? It's only polite. Put a video to the original source. Thanks for reminding me, chat. I really appreciate you. Okay. The video's paused. Oh, it sometimes does that when I minimize my YouTube screen. I don't know why. I don't know why, but it does. Let me start bringing on some guests. Hello, can you hear me? Oh. Hello.
Hey, Wick, I'm just still finishing my reaction to the interview as fast as possible. Okay. I got like another 5 minutes.
Go back, and in 5 minutes, I'll pull you in. Cool?
Sounds good, buddy. Appreciate you.
See ya. Oh, he wasn't ready. He wasn't prepared, gang. No, it's okay. He's watching it, and so we're gonna get his fresh takes. Okay, so I'm really excited about this. Okay, Arian A says just watched it yesterday. Zelenskyy destroyed his Kumbia argument. Mantis says, what about Russian security? What about peace? Fucking pathetic. Gang, you are far too harsh on Lex. We like Lex, but we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna get into it. Okay. I'll say this. If Lex didn't ask those soy questions, we wouldn't have gotten the great answers that Zelenskyy gave. And I'm going to be clear with you, gang. This is the best interview that Zelenskyy has given. He performed better than I've ever seen him in any speech, in any conference, at any point. He was fantastic. He knocked it out of the park. He did exactly what he needed to do, and he was very, very convincing. I did watch it with people, like in my real life. I sat on the couch, I sat next to my family, who are all MAGA supporters, right? I turned on that TV, and we watched it. Live. Well, not live, right? But we watched it, and I gauged their reactions. I knew their stances before, and I talked to them after about their stances and see the difference. And again, he did what he needed to do. He did what he needed to do. Now, will it change the world or anything like that? I don't know about that. And I am not without criticism of Lex in this, right? But yeah, I just think I'm just pleased. I'm very happy, okay, with how it turned out. I am. And we're gonna discuss it today. We're gonna discuss some of the highlights. I have some timestamps pulled up for some of what I think are the most important, I won't say best, the most important moments of the debate, at least from my perspective. There was a lot to it, though, and I'm curious to see what perspective my guests will bring in when they get here. Andrew is finishing up now. Hopefully the rest arrives soon and we can start. But how's everyone doing today? Everyone having a fun time? Has anyone not seen it yet? Has anyone not seen the show yet? Not seen the interview? Raise your hands. Hands? Any? Hey, Levi. What's up? Again, we're just waiting on my guests. They'll be here hopefully soon. Rabid Wombat says, I didn't watch it because I knew I'd be told what to think of it here. You should watch it, okay? Whether you like Zelenskyy or not, whether you like Lex or not, no matter what you think of the situation, I think that it is important to watch this interview. I do. Tricky says, I've only seen clips. Fair enough. It's important to watch the whole thing. Clips, remember, this was like it was almost a 3-hour conversation, I think, right? Like the video itself is longer than 3 hours only because Lex bookends the discussion by prefacing it and prologuing, or not prologuing. He has a preface and he has a conclusion, okay? And I think that those are interesting as well for other reasons. But we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to discuss it. But beware of clips. And this is one of those things where you have to really understand that people on all sides of this are going to clip things and are going to try to paint things out of context. The grossest thing I've seen so far is someone clipping a moment of friendly banter between Lex and Zelenskyy, where Lex is inviting him for barbecue in Texas or something, and Zelenskyy jokingly asks who's going to pay for it, right? It's a joke. It's obviously a joke. There was some asshole on Twitter who was like, oh, what a Jewish thing to say. Like, shut the... And that got, like, thousands of likes, too. And I'm like, this is pretty gross. Okay? Hold on. Give me a second. Andrew Mercado says he needs about 2 or 3 minutes. Again, hopefully Dylan and Ukrainian Ana arrive soon. But yeah, we'll get into it when we do. Levi says, I expected Zelenskyy to do a good job in the interview, but he was way better than I expected. Absolutely. I think that he outperformed my expectations as well, even though, again, I thought he would do fine. He didn't just do fine. He did great. So yeah, we're gonna go into it. We're gonna go into why. We're going to discuss it. Testy Johnson says Lex did nothing wrong. Mostly. I do have one criticism. Again, full disclosure, I'm a Lex fan. You might not like that. I watch Lex. Lex watches me. Okay. He actually follows me on Twitter. Little humble brag there, but no, I'm very charitably inclined towards Lex. I think he did overall. I think he did what the moment required. I'm very proud of the product that he put out. Honestly, I think he did excellent. But we're gonna talk about that, and I know a lot of people will say I disagree. He looked naive. He looked foolish. He looked like he didn't know what he was talking about. Look. Part of the interview process, one of the styles of interviews that I think Lex does, and others do this as well, and I think it's misunderstood, is you tee up a question for your interlocutor, okay? For someone you are talking to. And the question sounds stupid. It sounds dumb. But the reason you're asking this is so that the person you're interviewing has a chance to respond. And if they're at all good at interviews or anything like that, they're going to knock it home run out of the park. So yeah. We'll see. See how it goes. Let's start bringing people on. Let's see where they are. I don't know. They're all late. Ukrainian Ana will be there in a minute. Okay, we're getting there. Okay.
Reform relationships.
Are you ready yet? Are we?
I am. I'm good.
I'm just, I know time flying, right? And I know
Oh yeah,
Ukrainian Ana said she's going to be here in a second. I don't know where Dylan is, but
he's live, so he should.
yeah,
He
let
just probably needs
me
a
bing him. Hold on.
Bing Dylan. Chat, go Bing Dylan and tell him that it's time for panel.
We're ready.
I'll get my camera on and everything too when we're ready.
Yeah, that's all good.
Oh, good. Oh, good. You see here, the pit.
Just jump backstage.
No, I'm in this one. There we go.
So I saw I tuned into parts of your initial reaction. I was very curious how your chat would react and how you would react. What are your? Well, you know what? I'll wait till everyone gets here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to spoil it, but I'm very curious, right?
Yeah, for sure. I took notes too, so I do have things to
I got
talk
some,
about.
I got
But
some time
we'll probably
stamps,
we'll probably let. Honestly, you're probably gonna have Anna talk about it first because she's obviously most affected.
Yeah, that is the plan. But again, when she gets here, she gets here.
Of course.
And we got to fill time until then. I will say this. Again, I told my chat this, but I'll tell yours. Zelenskyy knocked it out of the park. I can't think of a better interview he has done in terms of how he performed. I think he answered every one of the questions that was put to him exactly correct.
If not re-answering too, like Lex revisited a couple things, and Zelenskyy still like took the time to answer, and it's a thought out answer too. It's not like something quick, or I didn't feel like he was trying to, like Zelenskyy wasn't trying to rush the interview or anything like that. Like he was too busy for the interview. He like really gave a solid interview. I agree for sure.
Okay, well, we got one of the lost here. Let me bring him on.
Let's do it. Oh, there he is.
How's it going?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Audio's fine. Ana says she'll be here momentarily, so when she gets here, we'll pull her on.
Fantastic. Let me just get my camera working, and I'll be here in a moment.
Cool.
So, just full disclosure for everyone else's audience, I told my audience this, and they are aware of this. I am a Lex fan, so there it is. That he does watch my show. He does give me money sometimes. He's super chatted to me. So just full disclosure, just know that. I don't want anyone coming later and saying, "What? Lex gave you $100 3 months ago. You're just a shill." No, I'm letting you know right now. Okay, so no one is surprised. Cool.
I think this is good faith. You're also having 3 very big voices for Ukraine on to talk about it too, in contrast to your support or your fandom for Lex too. So it's still
I'm a Ukraine supporter.
Very big, so big, gigantic, in fact.
Look, I have always been, at least since 2022 when the invasion started, I've always been like, Russia is entirely in the wrong. Ukraine is entirely in the right here. They have a right to defend themselves. They have a right to autonomy and to defend their national interests. And so if Lex disagrees, Lex disagrees. But yeah, it is what it is. Okay. Let's, while we're waiting, what are some of your thoughts on the style?
Wait. Can we introduce each other? I mean, audiences.
Yeah, I was gonna wait to do that until Ana.
You wanted some pre-talk.
Let me just do it quick, okay?
Okay.
This is Wick. He hosts panels. He likes to argue with people. He likes to yell at people. He likes to bully his compatriots and likes to get them to bully each other for money because it's a smart business, and I respect it. As one of his former contemporaries. And over here is Mercado, a war tourist of my industry, who likes to go in and film people in desperate situations, just like me, for money and profit because we're evil.
Exactly. No remarks.
Not to mention the smuggling, right? Smuggling weapons into Ukraine, part of the.
That's my forte.
Well, Wick, see, George Soros paid me personally to go there, so now this is my report to you from George Soros' funding.
Fair enough. It's always good to disclose. I've had some issues with that before. Give me 1 second.
You disclosed, so I felt like I had to.
Got you.
And yes, chat, this is Wick TV. Thank you so much for having us on. Obviously, Dylan Burns to the right of me here, who we occasionally spend time with Dylan, you know, when he graces us with his presence.
I heard you guys, or at least I saw the advertisements for it. I didn't get a chance to tune in. You guys played Civ 6. How'd that
Yep.
go? Who was Vic? First of all, which one of you won?
Dylan
You
was in a
know-
better position. I'm going to be honest. I was at war. I was at war from turn 20. So
So he let
And then for the-
you fight. And...
Well, no, the first game ended without a victor, and
True.
then he told me the next game would be at 7, and then by 9:30 I hadn't gotten a message, so I went to bed, and then they started once I passed out, and so obviously I was sabotaged, and they I was undercut from me being able to play, possibly due to fear, maybe intimidation, maybe it's a Freudian thing. I don't really know, but for whatever reason, Mercado acted like a damn dirty snake.
Wow. You know what? That's just good strategy, okay? Well, if you fight when your enemy is
is true.
asleep, you're much more likely to win.
exactly. I'm glad you understand that. Yeah, but we have another game coming up if anyone wants to play daytime. The overnight grind isn't for everyone. I can do it, but not everyone can stay awake for overnight Civ gameplay.
It's a skill issue, honestly. Okay, they just need to get good.
I agree. I fully agree.
Did this meet your expectations going in? Like the interview? Did when you heard the interview was going to drop before we saw it, obviously I had thoughts, you guys had thoughts, everyone had predictions. How accurate was your initial predictions compared to what the actual product was? Again, I'm not trying to get into the details right now because we're waiting on Ana, but yeah, we're filling time till she gets here. So
yeah, I'll go for Dylan. For me, it was the energy that Lex was providing before the interview. It was kind of like sus for me, like with the Russian language demand, and then the choosing Babin Yar. It was just kind of like seemed like it was focused a little bit because he took that picture out there. Which rightfully, it's his family history, but there's like current modern day war crimes and mass graves he could have went to get ready for the interview, especially in Bucha and Irpin. But Zelenskyy, not like me and you kind of rambled a little bit here at the start. That Zelenskyy knocked it out of the park. That went way better than I thought in terms of Zelenskyy's answers to Lex. But Lex's questions kind of matched the energy that I was seeing going into it. That it seemed very pointed questions, like questions that he had prepared. Which you're going to have questions prepared regardless. But it felt like he wasn't flowing with like what Zelenskyy was saying, and he wasn't really listening to Zelenskyy, and he was just instead like making sure that his questions, which seemingly had some talking points behind them, were asked even in the face of Zelenskyy answering them, or like Zelenskyy would spend 20 minutes saying, hey, this is why just a peace can't happen without justice. And then it seemed like Lex just didn't even hear him, or like he wasn't listening to him, and he would just be like, but I have a dream. It's like, no, you weren't listening.
okay. Well,
hello.
Hi, can you hear
Hey.
us?
Yes,
Hi, Ana.
hello.
You are a little
Hey.
low. Hold on, let me see if I can turn you up.
We'll turn Ana up higher.
Yeah,
I'm sorry I'm late.
it's okay.
I apologize.
You probably were busy saving the world over there. Okay, we give you some
No,
credit for
no.
that.
I actually slept. I will not make up any excuses, but I managed to fall asleep for the first time in days. So that was something that happened. And I slept for 11 hours.
Wow.
That hasn't happened in 3 years.
Hey, you got
So-
some rest.
So I'm incredibly
That's
happy
good.
about it. Yeah.
We're getting
So-
fresh Ana, well rested,
Well rested.
sharp, ready to go. I'm excited, and I hope you guys are excited to be here. First of all, before we do anything else, thank you. Thank you for being willing to come on and talk with me, right, and discuss this. I know that some of you may not have wanted to watch the interview at all, but I thought it was worth discussing, and I'm glad you guys decided to join me today. So thank you. Okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
Let's get this show on
Yeah.
the road. Welcome, 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 one and all, to yet another episode of Wick TV, cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, have we got a show for you today? Yesterday, Lex Fridman sat down with the president of Ukraine, Zelenskyy, to discuss a wide variety of topics and to interview the man about the state of play in Ukraine and possible paths to peace. There was a lot of drama coming into this interview. A lot of people had a lot of thoughts. And now that the interview is out, I wanted to discuss it because I think it is worth discussing. With that, I want to get just your initial impressions. Ana, and I want to start with you. You saw the video. What did you think? Give us what you got.
Honestly, I was never against the interview itself. Obviously, like why not? Exposure is good, even if it's on the channel of a person like Lex. But still, I appreciate that. And I was a little worried about how it will go specifically because of Zelensky. I really wasn't like sure if he will manage um, to ask the questions I really wanted him to ask, and to give answers I really thought he should ask. He should give, sorry, the answers, right? So, but he did way better than I thought he would, Zelensky. So, in that sense, I'm happy it happened. And Lex was, Lex. He asked the questions I expected him to ask, and was an NPC that I expected him to be. So, other than I have no problem with that interview whatsoever. I think it was a good thing that it happened, and overall, my impression was that Zelensky really showed that contrast between Lex's naive, out of touch, kumbaya situation with the actual reality of the situation and the history and the context and why certain negotiations are impossible, why just peace is not enough. Like all of this, he answered pretty well. And Lex had basically nothing to say to it other than just repeat, I have a dream. Uh, I think it was a good showing for Zelensky and for Ukraine. I don't know how much it will impact Lex's audience since it's heavily poisoned against Ukraine already. But that wasn't really the goal. I think to convert Lex's audience, but maybe to attract other eyes on it, since Lex is a popular person with a big podcast, and maybe some people would see it and they would think, damn, like this guy makes sense. I mean, president. So I was overall pretty happy, just in a broad sense, in how it went and how it turned out. I'm glad he agreed to it, and I'm glad he did it. And I also kind of grateful that Lex, despite my feelings on him, decided to do it. Because, for example, a person like Tucker Carlson, sure as fuck, I wouldn't appreciate doing that. But Lex, at least, he at least said that he wants to represent Zelensky's voice. And last time he was in Ukraine, he actually interviewed journalists and people like that and never published it. So I was kind of under the impression that he will not do this with
You thought
Zelensky at all, but he
he'd just keep it hidden or
pretty
something?
much.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that maybe he will not get what he wants, or he will bail from it. Like maybe I thought his like thing about the language was kind of like his attempt
A
to
poison pill
avoid the interview.
to get it to drop.
Yeah,
A lot of people said that, right? A lot of people were arguing that, but yeah,
but
it didn't seem to be
it
the
didn't
case.
turn out that way.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. Oh, and I was worried Zelensky would agree to speak in Russian. I was so worried he would agree, but it didn't end up being like a mixture of things. I watched it in the original. I didn't watch it with the AI dub, obviously. So it was mostly in Ukrainian with partial parts in Russian and with partial parts in English. So I am cool with that, but I'm not cool with him doing it fully in Russian, obviously. So
Well, fair enough.
yeah. So
No,
overall, that's it, pretty much.
okay. No, that's a good overview. I'm I'm curious to see what everyone else here will think. I know my audience is kind of split, right? A lot of people are very upset at Lex. A lot of people really like Lex, so it's interesting to see your perspective. Thank you. Let's go to Dylan next. Yeah. What did you think overall? Good, bad, and ugly. What do you got?
Good, bad, and ugly. That's a good way to divide it. So let's start with the good. The good is that I think that Zelensky had enough time to say everything he wanted to say. I don't feel like there was ever an area where Lex Fridman jumped down his throat and said, "Well, okay, but let's move on." And I feel like a lot of these mainstream interviews, because they're segmented to 30 minutes or they're segmented to a shorter period of time, or due to the political partisanship of the individual involved, they will go in and they'll cut off the president before he gets to describe the full history, which I always felt like when discussing with Americans was always one of my biggest issues, is they just don't have a basic knowledge of the history. And so him sitting down and explaining a lot more of the recent history, and by the way, the contrast between Zelensky's explanation of recent Ukrainian history and Putin's Reddit ramblings about Prince Yaroslav's horse, I mean, it could not be more stark, and it is evident the difference in media experience in trying to work with the public and communicate with them in a humanized way, which is very different. Putin communicates in an old Soviet style where he might as well have there's cigarette smoke in the room, as electrical interference as he just reads off the teleprompter. He doesn't come off in the same way that Zelensky knows how to come off in a very more human way, I think, and he knows how to communicate the story, the national storyteller of Ukraine. That is Zelensky's job, and I think he's always been the best at it, and he did it very well here. I also think that he came off very strong. Zelensky is not a physically imposing man. He's not somebody who, due to his history as a comedian and all of the footage that people have of him playing the piano with his penis, is not immediately the figure you would imagine to be your Abraham Lincoln type. Abraham Lincoln was kind of a goofy, lanky fellow, but that's not the immediate image you would imagine. And every time that Fridman tried to frame it in a way that Zelensky did not appreciate, for example, when he asked the question of forgiveness, which that'll be in my bad
I got
section.
I got timestamps for all these. We're gonna go through it. We're gonna watch it. Right?
Later, yeah.
But fair enough.
Damn.
Continue. Yeah.
But at any time that would happen, it wouldn't be he would just passively accept the framing and try to work within it. He would reframe the conversation from the Ukrainian perspective, because that is, according to what Lex wants to do, that's what he wants to capture. He wants to capture the Ukrainian perspective, and so it makes sense that he would reframe it, not because he was trying to dodge a question, but because he was trying to make clear that you need to understand something about forgiveness here. You need to understand the difference between accepting something because it's the reality and accepting forgiveness from a people who haven't even accepted that they're doing the wrong thing. How can you forgive somebody who hasn't even accepted that while they're butchering you and killing you, that they're doing something wrong? It doesn't make any sense. And so, I think he was strong. I think he communicated the national story well. And I think it worked very well to humanize Zelensky. I was going through some of the comments, and a lot of them are the same, why didn't you ask Zelensky why he butchered all of the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, the right wing is very mad at Lex right now. There's a lot of people who are very mad at Lex from the more kind of tanky MAGA
When the echo chamber shatters, the glass will rain down upon the acolytes, But I think that he did a good job in humanizing Zelensky, talking about his family story, but showing the position that he was in as very unfavorable, because I think a lot of people, not only they don't understand who Zelensky is, or they don't understand the Ukrainian story, so it's hard to sympathize with it, but also I think that they don't understand the decision making. They just see a war start and they're like, why don't you make a deal? But if you understand the circumstances and the men behind it, it's a lot harder for you to immediately just turn to distaste as, oh, this is some greedy motherfucker. No, it's somebody who's fighting desperately to protect his nation. So I guess that's all the good. The bad would be, and I don't want to drag this on for too long, but vapid Lex questions. There's just a lot of vapid questions from Lex that I don't know why he asked.
I'm going to defend Lex here, but carry on. Go ahead, please. Finish.
The question of forgiveness, I think, was bad. It's one thing to say. I've asked people this question before. How do you live with them? How do you live with them? But that's a different question than forgiveness. That you have to learn to live with somebody before you can even begin to imagine forgiving someone. It's like when he was jumping the gun on debates. He was asking him so the presidential debates after the war, you're gonna really give it to Aristova? It just felt very disconnected, and he was never gonna get a positive response. He was never gonna get an answer to that question. And sometimes in interviews, I feel like I'm kind of swinging, where I got through all my questions, but I'm like, fuck, I still got 30 minutes. What am I gonna throw out there now? And I think that might be what he started to do. But there really was some vapid questions. And Zelensky sometimes would say something really good, and Lex wouldn't know how to follow it up. He would either say the same question again because he didn't get a response within the framework that he wanted, or it'll just be wow, amazing, and the move on. I think a great example is when Zelensky was reframing the justice and making a deal. You don't just pick the middle between a burglar breaking into your house, destroying your lives, and he just okay, but because peace, let's find a place in the middle. It's okay, well then.
I have a dream.
I have a dream.
He has a dream.
Also, too, in the World War II part of the opening, when Zelensky was talking about the history, and then Lex like didn't hear him, and he's like, "Oh, I don't understand the joke" or something, and Zelensky didn't even tell a joke there. But it also goes back to when Zelensky said you can only talk to someone who is willing to listen. The irony in that statement, I didn't feel like Lex was really listening to him too much in this interview.
Well, I think. Oh, okay. Look, I want to discuss the interview itself rather than just become the Lex shill for the day. But I do think it is important to recognize that there was some translation issues. One of the things that I took away, I guess, aside from the meat, was Lex was really not happy with the translator. At the beginning, in the preface, and at the conclusion, he mentioned several times the translators apparently, allegedly, weren't translating correctly or incompletely, and there was a lot of background issues. So on the not getting a joke or thinking a joke was there that wasn't there, there has to be some allowances made for the fact that it was a trilingual conversation that was a struggle, at least according to Lex, but we'll get into that. Okay. Go ahead. No, please.
No, go ahead, Andy.
If you
Andy,
disagree with
answer.
me, by all means. This is what we're here to do. Right?
I kind of agree actually. Like I didn't find that like moment when he didn't understand the joke or something that cringe. As someone who works as translator, there's a lot of shitty, unfortunately, translators who do a very bad job, and especially when it's juggling like multiple languages. I have interviews when I translated Ukrainian, Russian, English, Ukrainian, Russian, English, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it's that sort of interview might be challenging, especially. So I'm not like gonna to be like on Lex's ass for being like sometimes saying like awkward shit or like maybe not understanding the questions of his. I found to be stupid. Yes.
Yeah.
But the sometimes the things like that, like you said, like for example that joke, that I was like, where was the joke? There was like no joke anywhere there, but there was like this awkward laughing on both sides because of the interpretation issue. It's not like a big deal to me. I wasn't like looking at this and thinking that Lex dude, it's not about that really.
It was
Plus I
funny
watched it in original, so of course I'm it might be worse in English actually. Like maybe the translation in English isn't as great as it was when he spoke in Ukrainian or like in Russian or in English. He actually spoke very well in English, weirdly. Bits when he spoke with English were pretty good, which is my gripe, by the way. I thought Lex's Russian was very good. So I thought that he wanted to speak in Russian to, so to speak, preserve the quality of the conversation, right? So it will be like the best it can be. But his Russian is shit. So I don't understand. He's not fluent. So I would say that it destroys the whole point. They should have spoke rather in English fully, because Zelensky's English is about as good as Lex's Russian, okay? So they should have spoken either in English fully to avoid this awkward whole language conversation, or they should have just spoken Ukrainian with a translator, and that's it pretty much. So with some casual Russian parts, it's not a big deal, obviously. Like sometimes Zelensky would really wanted him to, immediately understand, and he would go to Russian. So that's not a big deal to me, like I said. But it just was very funny that Lex presented it as if a conversation can be only perfect in Russian, because I speak Russian fluently and Zelensky speaks Russian fluently, but he doesn't. He doesn't speak Russian fluently, not at all. He couldn't even form the question in Russian normally. So I'm like, no offense to Lex, he spent most of his life in United States. Like it's normal to not be like fluent in the language you don't use that much. But it's just to me it just ruined his alibi for wanting Russian.
Okay, not to be too much of a Lex defender here, but in the conclusion, right after the interview was done, Lex, and again, this is what he says. He says that when he was speaking, the reason he spoke in Russian mostly throughout was because Zelensky needed a translator when he spoke in English, and that was jarring the conversation, so they switched. Again, I don't know how true that is, but that's what he said. So
true.
But then his original point was that he wants to speak Russian because it's the language that they both know that he's the best
Yeah,
at.
that's
And
what I meant. Yeah.
therefore, the best conversation can come through that. And it wasn't just like he made a private request. He did like a little bit of a public rallying cry. It
Yep.
wasn't like, I'm going to privately request, understanding the sensitivity of the issue. He was like, I'm going to make a broad appeal to the public after the Ukrainian president has already agreed that we're going to speak Russian because I'm such a great Russian speaker. And then he gets up there and he's like, Привет, товарищ. And I don't mean to be mean. I'm not mean to be mean, but at this point, like I should be interviewing Zelensky in Russian at this point.
Oh no,
Fair
Dylan, you still are 10 times worse than Lex. So
It's
I
so
must
worse.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I must defend him a little bit here. Yeah.
Let's kind of get into the there's a couple things that I think were interesting. I did like at the beginning Zelensky's talking about why he chose to speak in the language he did, right? Speaking of languages, right? And he kind of explained to the audience and to Lex himself why he wanted to use Ukrainian mostly throughout. Again, as I said before the interview, I think people jumped down Lex's throat about the Russian thing. They shouldn't have. However, as I said at the time, it's okay for Lex to ask this, but it's also okay for Zelensky to say no, right? And I'm glad that it worked out. I'm glad that eventually they got something there. But I will say that watching in the English dub, there were times when I'm like, man, it was a little rough for me to understand what was going on. And this is from the English dub. I can't speak to the other thing, but there was a few times where I'm not sure if it was the editing. I'm not sure if it was the AI translation. I'm not sure why, but things seem to not connect from the two of them. And yeah, that was a problem. It was a minor obstacle. Like I said, I think overall the interview was great. As I told the rest, this is Zelensky's best performance I've ever seen him do.
Can I
Frankly.
just comment a little bit
Please,
on the
go ahead.
language thing? Ever so slightly, because first of all, I am kind of annoyed because, like I said, I will probably watch it in the dub just to see, what's up. Like some parts, like were they good in translation or not? But I think you can find a good translator for the interview with the president. It's not that difficult. Like people who can make high quality translation exist. Yes, it's a little bit of a struggle sometimes to find one, but it's not impossible, and it's definitely not impossible to find a person in Ukraine who speaks Ukrainian, Russian, and English.
Lex, you hear?
Not to
If you're
push.
watching this, Lex, get Ukrainian
Yeah,
Ana next
yes,
time, okay? I'm
I'm
sure she'll do it
joking,
for enough
obviously,
money.
but
Right.
there it's three languages that most people know. Okay, so it's
Right.
out of all languages, those three are the languages that most people know. So that being said, that's one thing. But I was had complicated feelings about his power play, so to speak, about Russian language.
Go
First
ahead,
of
yeah.
all, first of all, because on like if we remove all the context from the situation and just look at it in a vacuum, a request to speak in the language that both of you speak better is not that crazy, right? It's a sensible request, right? So you want the conversation to flow the best it can, right? To catch the emotions and the nuances and everything, but you will still have to translate it, right, to the majority of people in English, because most of the audience Russians are not watching that shit. Like, I'm
No.
sorry, Lex, to hurt Lex's feelings, but the most people who will watch it are English speakers, like, right, the Americans, Lex's audience, right? So you will have to translate it either way. But Lex is Russian. So he was born in Tajikistan, but he spent most of his life most of his like early year life in Moscow, and then he moved to United States. So he has family, according to him, in Russia, who he speaks with, oftentimes. So he's not some innocent like bystander that doesn't know how Russia works or doesn't know about the relations between Ukraine and Russia when it comes to language. He knows because he himself in the interview says, my grandparents lived in Kiev, like they're all over Soviet Union, like in different areas. He had family, and he knows the history. He himself says it. It's not me making shit up. And also because of that, I cannot like close my eyes and pretend that this context doesn't exist. And it's also not a Russian person a very rich Russian person lives in the United States that promotes pro-Russian people all day, every day. People like Tucker Carlson, who he gave less pushback to than he did to Zelensky, and that person who has an audience that is very anti-Ukrainian. That person asking our president to speak Russian with him is a bit of a power move. It's a little bit of a power move. I'm not gonna lie, and I don't think he's naive enough not to know it. So it's good that Zelensky didn't take that bait, so to speak, and he stuck to his guns because Ukrainians were furious when
Right.
they saw this. Yeah, they were mad as shit. So if he
Mhm.
agreed to speak in Russian, he would like people would be like up in arms about it here, so to speak,
On
right?
that note
Yeah.
of other Ukrainians, and I'll get to you in a second, Andrew, but I want to ask
Mhm.
Anna this just really
Mhm.
quick. Have any of your friends or family seen it? What are their thoughts?
Oh yeah,
Does
yeah, yeah.
their sentiment echo
Uh,
yours?
I mean, I watched it with a friend
Okay,
actually together. So, and I know some people watched it as well. But to be honest with you, like most Ukrainians have fuck all idea who Lex Fridman is. They don't
fair.
watch like
That's fair.
Western, yeah, they don't watch like Western media that much. At least not YouTube. Like they watch movies and stuff,
Hmm.
Hollywood like films or something. But they don't watch the media people, right? And but of those who did, they were like super mad at that tweet, first of all, that he made, especially that he made it publicly, like Dylan said, because it wasn't just like a request to Zelensky's team or some shit, right? It was a public sort of call out, right? And sure, he like buttered it with, unfortunately, I don't know Ukrainian. It's not in my arsenal, but he did like try to butter it up. And but first of all, it's funny because now we know he doesn't speak Russian well. So what the hell was that? But other than that, it's just many Ukrainians just have to understand the history, which Zelensky explained, I think, sort of well in the interview, like you said itself, that during to the language is incredibly important here. It's not Ukrainian is the language that needs protection. And this is me saying this as a Russian speaker. I speak Russian, like most of my life and my time is I speak Russian, and it's just it's not Russian that needs defending. It's Ukrainian that needs defending. It's Ukrainian that they prohibited historically, and it's Ukrainian
Mhm.
language that is under attack right now in the
Mhm.
in the parts of the country they occupy. They forbid it. Okay. So because of that, it's a very sensitive issue, incredibly sensitive issue in Ukraine, and because of that, request of his comes off as either tone deaf or just malicious. I don't know. Like I will not make claims because I don't understand him, to be honest. Sometimes I think he's like a
I'll be the
malicious
Lex
actor that
translator.
no,
Okay.
yeah, that knows exactly what he's doing. And sometimes I'm thinking of him. Wait, this is like just a naive, sheltered, rich boy that doesn't understand much. Like I'm just always confused with Lex. I just don't get it. Like either he knows exactly what he's doing or he doesn't know what he's doing. So I refuse to make any claims about that. To be
Fair
honest
enough.
with you.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I want to hear what
Mhm,
Andrew wanted to say before I have any thoughts. So,
mhm.
Andrew, you're trying to get
Yeah,
in there. I want to give you some space. Yeah.
yeah. I was also just how Russia weaponizes language, basically, and Anna went into that at the end. Is that it's a very much a choice, right? And also the propaganda and misinformation that Russians banned in the East. I mean, Anna's sitting here right now in Kharkiv, Hannah, yeah, Kharkiv, speaking, and she said she's a Russian speaker. I mean, like, and then Zelensky brought this up in the interview as well. Like, Russian is not banned. You go to order food. There's a Russian option there. It's English, Ukrainian, Russian, and it's still there. So it goes and plays into Russian propaganda narratives too, of like, hey, can we speak it in Russian? Because then the people that believe this Russian propaganda that Russia's banned and all this, like, it perked them up more and just pissed off Ukrainians because it's like, why even do this? Zelensky's proven he's really good at English, or at least he can conduct an interview in English and certain words, like he'll have someone help him to get a word or whatever. But even then, that'd be one less language to have to translate, just English, and then Lex would have Ukrainian in his ear, but be able to have the translator. So
It
I agree
was
with that. But also, I had a question. I don't know if we're going to touch on it later, but it has to do with the translation and the language. But it was the slap on the wrist comment that was translated. And I don't know. You haven't heard the English dub yet of it. You only listened
Oh
to
no,
the
no.
mixed. So Dylan, then did you heard the English dub and the slap on the wrist comment that really meant to be rapping the knuckles that Zelensky was talking about with corruption? Basically, it was translated in the AI version that it was like a little punishment, like a slap on the wrist for corruption, and that
Oh,
wasn't the
I
true
hitting
think
on the
translation.
hands. Yeah,
Yeah, the true
was
yeah.
translation, it means like you're getting hit on the hands. And
It's
Anna, could you
hit
explain
your
that?
head.
Yeah, could you
It's
explain
like
it?
what he said. He said that you like imagine a stick, right? And you beat
Mhm.
a person's head that doing something wrong. That's technically what he said. Like, he
Wrapped
didn't
on the
say like
knuckles,
we
kind of
just.
thing.
Yes, I don't know this phrase to be honest,
Right.
but yeah, that's kind of what it was. Yeah, but it might have been translated as just we just gave him a little slap on the wrist, right?
That's how it came out too. That's how it
Yeah,
came out in the
They
AI.
did fix it though, at least in
Oh,
the so Lex on the video, he has a pinned comment. I think it's a second pinned comment where
Oh.
he acknowledges, yeah, the AI got this one wrong. We fixed the subtitles. So
Fair enough.
I
Fair
mean,
enough.
fair. Yeah, like no, that's the problem with translation, right? Is not everything's going to get through 100%. There's going to be mistakes. It's an art more than a science.
I
right?
apologize.
Oh.
Did they use just AI for translation, or
I
was it
believe
just
it was a
voiced?
mix. It was a mix
It
of
was like
AI and humans that did it. But they got it. They wanted to get it out as soon as possible. And Lex speaks about this in the video, right? Where they had hours to get this out, not days. And so they used a mix of AI and humans to do the translation and get it out as best.
Why did they only have hours?
I'm not sure, but I would imagine, if I had to guess, and this is only speculation, is Lex was under fire for not publishing the interviews of other Ukrainian journalists, so he probably wanted to get this out as soon as possible. Say, look, I actually do publish
Hey,
these
come
things.
on!
Yeah.
One day or 2
That would
days, they
be
put
what
it
I
away.
would do, right? If
That
someone makes an
feels like-
accusation to me that I'm hiding and covering up information, I'm be like, no, I'm gonna get this out as soon as
Could you
possible.
could you imagine J.R.R. Tolkien? He's like writing his last book, and they're like, "You didn't say you're gonna write that book forever." He's like, "Fine, I was gonna put the ending here. I was gonna write the last page, but I'm gonna publish it now because fuck you." And like, nah, come on.
You are acting as if everyone is a reasonable, rational, entirely makes the
Oh,
right
come
decisions
on,
all the
we-
time.
Good
The
job.
much easier explanation is that he just interviewed the president of a country fighting the largest war in Europe since World War II. He's excited because it's of historical
That's also
significance,
possible, yeah.
and the news is going to cover it. And so he was excited to publish it as soon as possible
Yeah.
while it was still in everybody's feeds, and everybody was still speculating.
Very possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So to answer your question, like again, this is all speculation. I don't know why they only had hours, but he does mention that they had hours. They put it out, and they used a mix of AI and humans. So yeah, I don't know the exact ratio.
Yeah, well, it's just that I understand, like, on a practical thing, like Zelensky does know Russian, obviously. Which, by the way, it was so funny that he spoke worse in Russian. Zelensky, he got used to speaking in Ukrainian, and him speaking Russian was like, it was clearly that he was struggling to speak Russian, which I'm so fucking proud right now as a Russian speaker. Dude was very bad at Ukrainian back in the day, to be honest with you. But now he's got so used to always speaking in Ukrainian, addressing everyone in Ukraine. He's just very good at it now, and it was clear that he was unused to speaking Russian on camera at all. So yeah, so it was just it's just. I mean, just also there's a little context that maybe your viewers really don't know that Dylan probably knows and Andrew probably also knows is that we have struggled with this speak Russian with me thing. It's like говори по-русски is like a meme, essentially, is what Russians say. So you encounter them and they always demand you accommodate them and speak in Russian to them, whether you're Georgian, whether you are Ukrainian, Armenian, whatever the hell, right? You are. They will make this imperial demand, okay, that you accommodate them. And this had that tone, to be honest. I don't know if it was on purpose. Lex is not living here, so he doesn't really probably, thinks about it that much. But it just, or maybe he was thinking about it. I don't know. But it just pisses off, like, immediately, like, everyone, if you do it. Not even in Ukraine, but in post-Soviet, like, sphere. It will be, everyone will be get flashbacks of being like talked down to by Russians and them demanding you speak Russian because you know it, but they never try to accommodate you ever. So your language doesn't matter, only theirs matters. And it's just he's a president. If he was like a random person, like a journalist or like a volunteer, like for example, if I talked with Lex, which is unlikely, okay, but I will speak Russian with him. No problem. Like obviously I would speak Russian with him because he wants to, why the fuck not, right? I know it, he knows it. But I'm just a person. I'm not a representative of a country, right? I'm not a representative of a struggle, he's the face of the nation right now. and he can't afford it just to bow down to Russian demands. And this whole argument about Russians will hear it, they heard him. He spoke in Russian. He made multiple addresses during the beginning of the war, in the middle of the war. He made giant ass speeches to Russians in Russian. Russians listen to everything we do. They have Telegram channels in which we all hang out in Russian. They know exactly what is going on. There's no need to address them at this point in war.
Well, they're not
And
the
I'm
only
sorry.
they're not the only Russian speakers though. I mean, a lot of that that area does have Russian speakers within it, not just Russians, but like in other countries
True, older
surrounding,
people
right?
mostly, but yeah, that's true. Like older generations would be Russian speakers because they have been Russified.
Yeah, yeah.
Younger would usually not be, but they can listen in English or they can listen. They have added subtitles. There are subtitles in Russian. There are subtitles in Ukrainian. There are subtitles in English. My mom, for example, would watch it listen with the Russian subs. Okay. Because she's Russian herself, so she doesn't really know English, and so yeah, she could use subtitles and watch it, the bits that are in English, for example, in Russian, right? And so can Russians who want to, right? But most of them have, at this point at war, they heard everything there is to say. They will not change anyone's mind there, right? And it
Yeah,
just
that's
but
a
American audience, yes,
yeah.
sure, yeah, but they will still watch in English, right? Either way, whether he spoke Russian or Ukrainian. Zelensky actually kind of jabbed him a little bit because he was like, Trump will listen to this, American will listen to this. I gave you my word that everyone will listen to this, and he's like, well, YouTube is blocked in Russia, right? And then he was, and he didn't say like anything, and then he was like, also my guy, Trump will understand me better if I speak Russian.
Will he love me?
Yeah,
He will
will he
love.
love me?
Yeah, will he love me?
Unlikely. If Trump will listen to that, which let's be honest, Trump is not sitting 3 hours listening to this conversation.
Oh,
But
no.
if he, but if
You know
he
what?
would do
I
it,
don't
then
know.
uh, oh,
Zelensky praised Trump. I think Trump will listen to that. I'm not gonna lie.
He'll-
I think
he'll
Trump will
listen
be
to a
like,
clip.
"Oh,
only
he's
the
a good
bit.
thing."
He'll listen to the clip. He's not gonna sit down
Yeah.
and be like,
Fair
"Wow,
enough.
I never really thought
Fair
about
enough.
the Budapest Memorandum before in this way."
He'll
Yeah.
have an aide tell him that Zelensky said good things about him, and then that's good enough for Trump. He'll be
Yeah,
happy.
I think he would listen to the bits when Trump is like, when Zelensky is like, Trump is very strong, much stronger than Kamala, and Trump would be like,
This is the
yeah,
best. I love
that's
this.
the one.
I mean,
That's
like,
the one.
well, let's talk about that for a minute, right? Because it came off as obvious to me during the interview that Zelensky was speaking somewhat to Trump through this this
Mhm.
medium, and he really stressed the strength of Trump, the need to have Trump on the side of Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. How? And this is a question for all of you. Do we think that'll work? First of all.
It's for me, it's the only thing that can at this point, or the only thing you can try to do, because of Russia's trying to separate Ukraine and the United States, but also Europe as a whole. But really, the Ukraine and U.S. alliance together, and the easiest route you can do that is unfortunately through MAGA and Trump's own base. But now Trump's going to be the president again, and he can't really play off all of these narratives, or maybe he will. That's the shitty part about this, is there's too many unknowns. But Zelensky can't get on there and just poop on him. You can't just say, oh, Trump is terrible and we don't have any trust in him. And he needs to try to appeal to Trump, because he's going to have to work with them regardless. And right now, Ukraine cares about their existence more so than, American domestic issues and all the problems that we do have, right? They care about survival, because that's what they're fighting for, is literally survival. So he's got to do what he's got to do. He's got to kiss Trump, in my opinion. He's got to kiss Trump's ass, tickle it a little bit, whatever he's got to do. And I think Zelensky did a good job of that in the interview, but also being realistic about it. And he also was like, hey, if Trump doesn't help us, this is what could happen, or this is what will happen. So that's why I feel like he engaged with Trump on that note.
Any other thoughts on this?
I basically agree, yeah, with Andrew.
Okay. Andrew got it right in one. What do you think, Dylan?
Finally.
I mean, yeah, it's Trump's. He's trying to make the pitch to Trump. He needs to have Trump on his side, because there's not really any other option. Everything gets worse for Ukraine if the United States is not in their corner. From negotiating, from if the war has to continue and they have to supply their troops somehow, from the amount of manpower it'll take to hold the front line to what those people on the front line will be using. And so for them, they have to make the best possible pitch to Trump. And there's a bunch of ways you can go about it. You can go about it by making the argument about, for example, Zelensky later in this, even though this is not an America thing, he made the pitch about their uranium supply and how the French just lost their uranium suppliers in Africa due to the recent military coups. And they could use, Ukraine as a supply of this. But he needs to make a pitch towards Trump, for example, on the military bases. I know that one pitch that people are talking about is Ukrainian soldiers taking up American bases so they can free up personnel to be deployed elsewhere, while also reducing America's footprint in Europe and the total amount of cost. So different pitches like this to which Trump can say, hey, that's a deal. I see there's a deal here. There's something I can get out of this. And if he can make that pitch enough, while also arguing that, hey, you don't want to be like Obama, weak Obama, just continuing the same policies of the last libtard administrations. You don't want to be like Biden starting your administration, immediately foreign policy crisis, popularity plummets. You don't want to have Trump's name branded on top of the fall of the city of Kherson or the city of Kupiansk or the fall of Kramatorsk. You don't want that on your brand. And so he has to make this pitch because there's no other option. Whether or not it'll succeed, I don't know. I hope it succeeds. I hope it succeeds because I think they'll it's important for the United States. I think it's important, of course, for Ukraine. But the thing is, even if you have the best foreign policy people around Trump make the argument, the bad people get boxed out, he gets set on this path, he continues to send aid to Ukraine, while, best case scenario, getting the Europeans to increase their aid spending. We saw what Trump was like in Syria. We saw what happened when it was in the middle of the night. He makes this decision to pull out, and then in the morning he just makes this decision to go back in, and then shortly after out, then back in, and he's making these flip-flop decisions. And I'm worried about the sporadic nature of Trump because I don't think there's anything fundamental underpinning his foreign policy. While you could say a lot of things about Harris and Biden, I think on some basic level, they're against the idea of Ukraine's sovereignty being trampled upon on some legalistic international liberal view. They're like, this is uncouth towards the international order. You might think that they'll let America bend the rules, but when you go over to Trump saying, we need the Panama Canal and we'll take it back because it's important for our strategic interests. And therefore it is ours because we bled for it. What does that sound like? And so I don't think the same fundamental ideological underpinnings exist. And I think he's too sporadic to really be 100% dependable, which is why I wasn't super excited about Harris. I at least knew that I could depend on her to give us at least milquetoast support at the bare minimum.
Also, Wick, too, really quick, the peace through strength messaging that Trump loves to use. I like how Zelensky has kind of turned that back onto him.
Yeah,
You like peace through strength, then give us some strength. We'll have some peace because that's the only way. I mean, Russia's invaded Ukraine, right? It's not the other way around. Right? Ukraine has no interest in Russia. It's completely a war on Ukraine. So when you talk about peace through strength, the only way to help Ukraine have this peace is to give them the capabilities they need to fight, which falls right into Trump's slogan that he's got there. So I like that.
That does bring up another point, and we're going a little bit out of order of what I wanted to, but that's fine. There is a point in the podcast where Zelensky, and he does this twice, I believe, but Zelensky makes a point, right? I think Lex asks him, hey, what would it take for the Ukrainian people and the Russian people to intermarry again, to forgive each other, peace, love, all that.
So cringe. I died.
I understand, but that is Lex's thing. He's done this all the time with everyone. It's not new. If you didn't expect this coming in, I don't know what to tell you.
I expected that.
I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, that question was coming. I knew it was coming.
Has he ever done that with Palestinians and Israelis? Like, has he ever?
I think he might have when it came to the Israel-Palestine situation with Netanyahu and some of the Palestine. I think he's.
Think so.
I'd have to go back and check. But it wouldn't surprise me if he did, right? I couldn't say for sure. I'd have to go back and check.
It was a Lex thing to do. Let's all agree. It was a Lex thing to do. Yeah.
How long until Nasrallah and Netanyahu can have a gay family together?
Yeah, kiss.
But I want to talk about Zelensky's response actually, because I think his response was interesting. And he makes an analogy, and the analogy he makes is like, if you were a father, if you were someone with children, and your children had been killed by the aggressor. And then there comes a time to stop the war, but the people who killed your children, they're living their life, right? They're doing their thing. They're in Ukraine, Russia, I should say. They're in Russia, just existing still, right? Would you consider that peace? Would you consider that justice? And I wanted to kind of gauge your guys' thoughts on that answer and maybe talk about it a little bit with you, because I'm of two minds here. But first of all, how do you think of what do you think of Zelensky using that tack to kind of get to Lex and get to the audience and kind of explain what Ukrainians are feeling? And I want to start with Anna on this because she would probably know best, right? So go ahead.
I would say that I didn't expect, to be honest, this angle that he took. So I was thinking he'd said some things I did expect. For example, he would be like, "Well, they're not really, it's not Germany. They're not asking like they have not expected their fault, and they're like, yeah, we did wrong. We were the aggressor. They didn't pay that. They don't even think that." Like most Russians think they're in the right at the very least, or they're doing something that is okay to do at the very least, if not needed, right? So we are not at the stage to speak of any sort of forgiveness. It's not possible. And he said he was like, nah, nah, man, there will no forgiveness is possible right now, not in this generation. In my opinion, he's correct on that, obviously, right? But again, it depends. It's on Russia. It's not on us. It's on them to ask for forgiveness. It's on them to admit they did the wrong, not only to us, but to Georgia, to Moldova, to Chechnya, to Syria, for fuck's sake, right? They have so much to that they haven't atoned for anything they did. They didn't take accountability for anything they did. Not 300 years ago, not 100 years ago, and definitely not now. So there is no conversation. Can you forgive a person who is not asking you to? He's not asking you to forgive them, and I appreciate that he took that angle a little bit. But the angle you mentioned is the vindictive, like the thirst for justice and like sort of even like maybe even vengeance a little bit, right? Is something it's true. Like it's a risky thing he said it, but it's true because people
Why
demand
risky?
justice.
Just on real quick on that. You say it's a risky thing. What do you mean?
It's something that many people won't understand outside of the Ukraine and of the people who are not in war, right? The people who have not been wronged in such a way. So, for example, for
Mhm.
Lex's cushion, no offense, audience in the United States, it's quite difficult to understand. And even he tried to make it personal, but speaking about your children, your loved ones being killed, right? But it's very on point. People demand. There's a lot of hate, a lot of hatred, right? And that hatred is just we didn't hate them before, we were like accommodating them, we were like treating them as with the privileges, okay. A Russian comes to Ukraine, everyone's like, oh, a Russian came to Ukraine. We treated them better than they ever deserved. We forgave everything they did before. We let all of that go. All the more mass executions, everything. Never spoke about. Even nobody cared, right? Everyone was, it's in the past. Who cares? We're now separate countries. Now we are like a fraternal nations. All of that business, right? But they tarnished it. They tarnished it themselves. So it's there's a lot of hatred in people's hearts, and they have to have some sort of justice. Otherwise, there will be no peace. There are multiple people, like you said, thousands of people who will be willing to pick up arms and actually commit some crazy shit, like I don't know, like terrorist attacks maybe on Russia or some sort of thing. Even if that unjust peace, I'm not saying they should. Obviously, I'm not advocating for
We get
vengeance
it.
or
Yeah.
anything. Yeah, but it will happen because there's so much hatred that has no place to go. It needs to go somewhere, right? That hatred. And you have to let it go somehow. But how can you let it go if your family was brutally fucking
Well,
murdered
that's
and
the
tossed in a
question,
mass
right?
grave?
Yeah.
Yeah, in Izium. How can you let that go? And then if there will be some sort of justice, not the ones we want, perhaps. Like nobody expects, like I think at this point, Putin to be hanging on a, I don't know, by the neck somewhere, right? But that's what Zelensky brought up. He said that's already a compromise. That's already a compromise to let Russia get away with the mass murder, torture, abduction of thousands upon thousands of people, deportations, all of that. Like I'm willing for them to get away with murdering my father. I'm all right with that idea, but many people are not, and it's something that it's something that has to be addressed. The justice, the peace that people say we should accept will not be accepted by many people. And we have so many people with arms, okay, with weapons, many battalions that are super duper nationalistic and super duper aggressive, right, in their search for justice and their first to defend their country. What they will do? What will people like, for example, Kraken do? The battalion, right? What they will do when if unjust peace is forced upon us, right? To accept all of Russia's conditions and just let them get away with they got away with everything before. People don't want that. People don't want them to get away with everything like they did in Chechnya or Georgia. It's a risky thing to speak about that, but there's a lot of hatred that I think is well deserved, but that hatred needs to be addressed. It cannot be just swiped under the rug. I'm not saying we're going to be Palestine Israel situation, but you know, things like that can happen. Yeah, and they can happen here as well. So I think
It's
that's what he
yeah.
meant and what he brought up. I think it's a just thing to talk about. I just never heard people talk about it at all. It was the first time I heard people mentioning it. So,
So and I want to hear the rest of your answers as well, obviously. But I when I was listening to that, it reminded me of the situation between Japan and China, and the Japanese people and the Chinese people. The Chinese people still have not forgiven the Japanese people for the rape of
yeah.
Nanking and for the other atrocities that were committed in World War II. There is still huge bouts of racial animosity between these two groups. And honestly, unfortunately, I worry that the same situation is going to play out in Ukraine and Russia, right? Regardless of who wins this war at the end, right? There's going to be this lasting animosity that is just there, and that's my fear, at least.
My
Can I
question,
just-
Dylan, you go ahead. You haven't talked
Yeah,
enough. Go ahead.
I just want to quickly state. There's a few things I want to say, but I'll just say this quickly as to not bog anything down. For me, it feels like I understand the desire for people to return to this idea of the brotherly nations, for these families that have been divided to be able to be reunited in peace and harmony, and not to be awkward because it's like, yeah, my cousin killed your cousin, and yeah, I understand the desire for people to want that, but I mean, to me, it is worse to stay in an abusive relationship than it is to leave that relationship until things have fundamentally changed. And so, if they're the brotherly nations, this is the most abusive household you can imagine, and we need to send child protective services and separate and break up the family. So, for me, I understand you want that, but until the abuse stops, you gotta shut it down.
And Andrew, go ahead. You wanted to jump in there.
No justice, no peace. That's all I got.
Oh, fair enough. Well, let's talk about it for a moment, because it is something that was brought up in the interview, and I think it's worth sure. What does a just peace look like? Unfortunately, and I'm just gonna say it, and you guys can be mad at me if you want. I think there is going to have to be some concessions, right? At this point, I don't think Ukraine. I hope I'm wrong. I hope to God I'm wrong.
You're right. We only get half of Russia.
Right. Fair enough. But I don't know if Ukraine can just outright win this. I think at some point there's got to be something. So what does a just resolution to this look like? Zelenskyy mentioned NATO, right? And mentioned joining NATO and how that was a guarantee for both Russia's security and for Ukrainian security. And fair enough. But I think Lex, and this is a good question that I think he asked, and I'll praise Lex a little for this. Lex said, well, Trump has a very real high possibility of leaving NATO, and in that case, NATO has no teeth. So what, outside of that, what does a just peace look like? And I want to ask you guys this question. What do you think?
Hey guys, can you hear me? My mic was off for some reason.
Yes. Can you
Loud
hear
and clear.
us?
I just before we go to this, I just wanted to add a little bit to what Dylan said about the abusive relationship. Why I found this question, although I'm used to it, Americans ask this question a lot, unfortunately for my soul, okay, about the forgiveness bit. But you cannot. It's like asking a person who is in the middle of like being raped, stop the rape for a second, and you'll be like, can you forgive that guy right now? Like, You know, the war is still going. Like the whole thing is still on. And to ask for that is just, it's not just an abusive household, how Dylan said. It's actually like it's in the middle of the beating. Okay, it's just you can't ask that question. You can ask Germans, right? Or like I don't know, like Jews, for example, like all Polish people, Ukrainian people about the Germany, Nazi Germans, right? You could ask them. They forgave them, right? There's no like bad blood now, but it's been years. First of all, it's been atonement. It's been a recognition. It's been reparations. It's been all of that, and it's just it's not a conversation we need to have right now. In my opinion, it's just abusive, in my opinion, to even hear that as a Ukrainian.
Fair
To
enough.
Yeah, that's one thing. But yeah, but the when it comes to the concessions, I will not be mad at you. It's reasonable to say that. I believe at this point. Unfortunately, I think we had a chance to actually return much more than we have returned if the supply would have been consistent, if the support of the West would have been consistent, if we didn't lost our momentum, if we didn't, we're now bombed by glide bombs 24/7 because Russians has been allowed to do it without us being able to hit them, their aviation, their planes, and things like that. A lot of mistakes have been made, unfortunately, especially by United States and Europe, our allies. And I have to like contend, obviously, with the reality that the momentum has been sort of lost. And with Trump, it's not like I don't know like what will happen. Maybe situation will get 10 times worse, and he cuts off all aid, for example, right? Or maybe actually Putin will say he has small hands, and he will be completely like on our side and decide to bomb like Kremlin or some shit. Like I don't know honestly, and that's anxiety obviously for me to not know what the president will do, but of our like of the most important country in the world right now and the most powerful country, right? But at the same time, there has to be concessions maybe made. But I think Zelensky addressed it. Even if there are, we have to be in a strong position when we negotiate.
What does
So we
that
have
look
something
like?
new to
What does a strong position look like? That's my
NATO.
what
question.
he addressed it, I think, pretty well. We have to have some strong security guarantees that he even said so. Even if we have to get lost our territories, right? We have to be sure that the rest certainly remains without Putin attacking us, right? So he said that during the interview. We have to be like 100% certain, and we have to if we have to make such a horrendous like sacrifice, right? Of leaving those people, right? Of abandoning millions of people, right? If we have to make such a choice, then this choice needs to be well fucking compensated. Otherwise, I just don't see why we shouldn't be making it, right? And that's something that is important. Obviously, NATO is a very important because NATO is still something that people believe in to be a good guarantee, which Zelensky brought up. He said, NATO countries are not attacked right now, right? Us, we are, and Moldova was, and Georgia was, right? Those are the countries that are not under NATO protection, and we see the difference between those two things, right? But for example, he brought up Budapest memorandum that you can wipe your ass with that, literally, because those assurances, assurances more than guarantees, that don't mean anything, and nobody in Ukraine believes that. Nobody in Ukraine believes that the West will actually defend us, even if they say they will, without something like NATO, for example, right? And maybe there is something that could be created, like a new security alliance or some shit. Like I'm not an expert, obviously, right? I
Certainly.
don't know, but yeah, but we have to really have that sense of security, and without it, it's just you asking us to make the most like horrendous sacrifice imaginable for nothing, for no gain, and people will not do it. I'm very angry actually that Zelensky didn't ask Lex what Russia should sacrifice. He was
Mm.
talking a lot about the sacrifice on our part. We are already sacrificed in so many fucking things you can't even imagine, right? But what's Russian compromise? We don't get into NATO, right? Lex obviously made a complete point that it's not going to happen in his opinion. He doesn't want that, right? And because Russia doesn't want that and won't allow it, right? So we don't have any security guarantees. We will not go into NATO. We will give them most important parts of our country with the most resources there and the most access to the natural resources, to the sea and everything, right? And we give them our people, like our actual blood, right, of our people there. And I don't really want to talk about
Sure.
what they will do to
Yeah.
those people,
Yeah.
right? So we give all of that, and what do we get exactly?
Well,
What Russia loses?
one of the things Zelensky did
Yes.
mention was using the frozen assets, 300 billion, I believe, was the
Mhm.
number he used, in order to rearm Ukraine in the aftermath of the war and fund kind of like their defense in perpetuity. And while yes, cold comfort, it's just dollars while you guys are giving up blood.
It's something. That's
To
better than
Zelensky's
nothing.
credit, he
Yeah.
brought something up, right? Is
Mhm.
that what I'm saying? But
Mhm.
I want to hear from other people as well. Like,
Okay.
what are your thoughts on this? On what does a strong position look like? What kind of compromises would be, do you think, acceptable? You're all familiar with the ground, at least somewhat over there,
Mhm.
right? You're all at least somewhat familiar with the situation. What would actually lead to sustainable peace? Go ahead.
So right now, I mean, well, Ukraine is in Kursk instead of Russia, so they do have a piece of Russia to negotiate with if they're forced to, if this is what comes of it. And again, this is assuming this is what happens, right? If we're assuming that Ukraine is forced
Yeah,
into
we
a
don't
negotiation,
know.
exactly.
Like,
So
anything can happen.
we're just
Yeah.
guessing right now, right? So for me, the only security guarantee would be NATO, and I kind of agree with that. Like at least the unoccupied parts of Ukraine guarantee NATO, and that is because of the history. And Anna kind of laid it out already through the Budapest Memorandum, Minsk agreements. Like they continue to make these security guarantees that aren't NATO related, but then they continue to be invaded. The Russians continue to bring military force into Ukraine and try to occupy Ukraine. And like Anna mentioned in the interview, the only guarantee we've seen is NATO, and like NATO countries aren't fighting each other. We're not at war with each other, and anything we have a deterrent to where if anyone invades a NATO country, that all the NATO countries are now involved. Article 5. Right? Then every country is involved. So it's kind of like a deterrent and a deterrent, right? The military forces are a deterrent. We have the best militaries, but who would want to take on all of NATO if you invade one single NATO country, right? So I feel the only actual guarantee, and I'd have to agree with Zelensky because I think this is what he was trying to say in the interview, would be to be in NATO and have that the unoccupied parts of Ukraine, if that's what the deal is, to be NATO guaranteed security, because that's the only thing that through history here has proven to be a real deterrent, and Ukraine needs a real deterrent, not pieces of paper or promises or vibes. Like that's just not going to work.
Makes sense to me. Dylan, go ahead.
So is the question what's like workable right now, or what's a just peace?
Both, actually. I want to hear your answer to both. Like, we got to dwell in both the reality, but we can be a little idealistic here too as
Okay,
well.
let me be the bit of a hardliner here, okay? So you can write whatever land you want over to the Russians on whatever piece of paper. It doesn't change the fact that there's people there that are never going to be able to, they're not just going to be able to turn into Russians. They're not going to change their culture. They're not going to change their language. And because of their past political affiliations or military affiliations or activisms or just basically any basic membership in civic society, they're not going to be able to return back to their homes. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's that they're a different Christian. Maybe they're a type of Protestant Christian, or they're a type of Christian that isn't with the Russian Orthodox Church, which have been systematically suppressed in occupied territory, with their churches taken over, burnt down, and destroyed as they are either forced from the territory or sometimes even tortured and killed. And so when you think about these people and you're talking about a just peace, signing over that land is not going to be a just peace in any scenario. Once you've signed over that land, that isn't just.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a situation where a little bit less territory could be taken and it'll be less unjust, or you could have a situation with more of that territory and more, sorry, somebody just donated money and it's chippering in my ear.
Yay,
Thank you for the
money.
$50. I appreciate it.
Get
Or
rich.
maybe it's more territory that you're handing over and it's more unjust. When somebody says a just peace deal, if you're talking about handing over land and the lives of people who are not going to be able to go back to their homes, people who have been left behind and have been waiting and waiting and waiting, that's not just. It's a question of whether or not you would sacrifice these things, make these either short-term or long-term, if it becomes permanent, sacrifices in order to attain something that would be less unjust. For example, a pointless effort to take back territory if there's no chance of taking it back ever. If that calculation can be made, which I don't believe it can, not at this point. So for me, if you're talking about a just peace, it's a peace where the Russians are out of Ukraine and the Ukrainians get all their land back, and everybody gets to go back to their home. Let's
be real. Do you think that's realistic?
I think that we need to do everything in our power to get us as close to that as physically possible. And I think that something close to that is physically possible. Yes, it's a question of whether or not we take the actions necessary to get to that goal. Because the Russians cannot sustain this war forever. Their loss of their tank loss rate, their personnel loss rate, the amount they're spending to recruit personnel, they're spending more to get new recruits than the American military is. And then when you consider Russia's, cost of living, that is obscene. That is obscene that new Russian recruits could talk about like, oh, should I get a Dodge Charger? That's fucking crazy that Tuvans can have that conversation. We have actually seen poverty in Russia decrease during the extent of this war, and that's not because, oh my god, the Russian economy is just so great right now. It's because the death payments and the amount of money that they have to give to new recruits has literally reduced poverty because of the amount of blood money that has been pumped in. So this is not a sustainable model to a country that has lost its largest gas consumers. And 35% of the European energy market was coming from the Russians. And so the Russians have terrible losses. The Russians are burning through the rest of their Soviet stockpile. The Russians are dealing with more and more economic catastrophe as we see the Russian bond market and a bunch of other stuff continue to degenerate. And so for me, we need to go into this thinking, remember the Russian weaknesses. We need to remember what the Ukrainian strengths they do have from a defensive position, what we do have as an alliance of over 1 billion people versus a country of 160 million people, to get the Ukrainians the best deal possible, because if they're going to be treated as a NATO ally or an ally of the West, we need to treat them as we would want them to treat us. And that would be, I would expect Ukrainians, if we were in the same position, to do everything they could to liberate Southern California.
Look, I'm with you. I agree. That would be great. But then I look at who controls the White House. I look at, Congress is playing fucky-wucky games with the funding, right? And there comes a point where you have to say, well, unfortunately, we're not going to do the right thing. I wish we would. I don't think we will. I'm going to be real with you. I don't think Congress is going to do what they need to do. I'm with you on what they need to do. I'm with you on they should. But we got to talk, will they? And I don't know. I just don't have the faith in the current Congress that they will.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
I like those lights, Anna.
Yeah.
That was cool.
I didn't know if you were, that was your,
That
like,
just-
Oh,
that
signal
distracted
to
me. I'm like,
talk,
oh
or-
no, light show now. Let's go.
I didn't want to distract anyone, so I by accident click on it sometimes, and then I turn off. That's basically what happens all the time. But I will say though, Wick, that
Mm.
I'm a little bit moved right now that Mr. Burns is more idealistic than I am, which I mean it's kind of, I mean I love that people care so much, like, and I love Dylan obviously for that, but I also am I'm like of both minds. I never speak about justice, to be honest, because I don't think like I'm allowed to. Like at this point in time, like nobody wants to hear from us about like Dylan talked about it, right? That there is no justice in any given territory to Russia, and I believe that's my opinion. But I just don't think like I'm in place to be talking about it, unfortunately, because people are not interested in justice. It seems people are interested in pressing us into surrender or concessions, which are technically will be surrender. And the worst thing I personally am afraid of, obviously, as they will push us to surrender and to accept, and then like Zelensky said, Putin will just invade again. And then he will be much better prepared because he's not dumb. He will be they already calculated a lot of things that did them in the initial wave of their invasion, right? They're better now than they used to be at fighting, right? So that's they will just do Chechnya essentially, right? So they lost the first war. They signed a little bit of a toilet paper agreement about the ceasefire and the peace, so to speak, and then they destroyed them. Next time they were much better prepared, and Chechnya was incredibly like tired and beaten up, and also understand that the war is happening on our land, right? Like Zelensky pointed out. So us, we will be wasting time trying to rebuild, trying to maybe restore a power grid that is like half destroyed right now, right? We will be trying to somehow lick our wounds, where Russia will not. They will just produce insane amounts of glide bombs, insane amount of like buy 100,000, 20 billion more shells and Shahed drones, which Iran and North Korea just gift them essentially. Us, we have to like be, oh please give us 5 shells or 5 tanks, please, our dear Western allies. But when it comes to Russia, right, their allies are better. I'm sad to say they're just throwing shit their way without any like pay or anything, right? And it's just it's quite difficult. And I did lose my hope in the West and their desire and their will to support us as we need to actually like win or to have more land of ours at least back, right? And I'm not saying it's not possible. Because, for example, Syria happened just recently, right? So people have been saying, like, to me, like they were like making fun of me. Actually, on your panel week, I think a bunch of like leftoids were making fun of me in 22 because I said, like, you see, Syria is still resistant; they're still fighting despite everything. It's been like 15 years by this
The
point, right?
Ana
And they
win,
were like,
by the way. We should get those
yes,
clips and
by
send
the
them to
way,
him. Yeah, yeah.
and a W, as you people say, right? And L tankies. I don't remember who was that exactly, but it's just they were like, ha
Exactly.
ha, look at that stupid bitch. Like she thinks like it's possible, and it is. They fucking nailed it. No, Assad is no more, right? And it took long time. It took a long time, and I think people expect us for some reason to breeze in and defeat one of the biggest armies in the world and without any proper help. And it sometimes annoys the fuck out of me because Russia is 30 times our size, and I think we're doing pretty well considering that fact, right? And I still believe people can take their hats out of their asses, the phrase I think is right, and somehow actually help us properly. And in that case, I don't want to give up the chance to do it, right?
Yeah,
uh
obviously. Like, obviously, look,
Prematurely, yeah.
as we again, Syria is an excellent example because that again showed everyone had written it off. Everyone thought Assad was just good to go. His regime was shaky but fairly secure, and then almost overnight, that situation just changed, and
Yep.
his guard fell apart. And well, now Syria has new leadership. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but it's in transitionary stage, but it is what it is. And I do think that should be a lesson to everyone who is saying, well, Ukrainians can't win. And I've heard a lot of that defeatist kind of talk, right? And I'll be honest with you, in my darker moments, I look at it, I'm like, I don't know, right?
I
I don't
understand
know.
why.
Well,
It's not like yeah, you
Yeah.
understand why it's not.
yeah,
It's not. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
Russia.
it's just about the Syria. I actually was so moved recently. I just watched a bunch of videos of I think I apologize. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I think it's Oz something. Qatar. Fuck, I forgot. But he's a journalist who has been doing like a bunch of stuff in Ukraine, but
Oz.
also in Syria.
Oz.
Yeah, Oz. Yeah, I read his Twitter quite a bit, and I saw him doing videos with the Syrians in Syria, asking them questions about Ukraine. And that was the best advice I heard from anyone because I suppose they understand better than most people would, and they would be like, just be patient, just be patient. They brought a line to it, obviously, but it doesn't matter like whether you're religious or not. But they were like, just be patient, you have to be like patient and believe, and you don't have to despair like kills the future, essentially, is what they said, right? It kills the hope, it kills like we waited through horrible things, right? We waited for like such a long time, and it happened because we still had the will to actually fight. And I thought like fuck me, like I am like in that despair phase right now, like for some reason, like I am thinking about like I'm despairing like prematurely, like before, like there is no other choice to make. And I was just quite inspired by just it's a cutesy shit, but I was very inspired by listening to them talking about Ukraine and wishing us patience most of all, right? To
It's-
to be
And
to be resilient. Yeah.
and speaking on that resilience
Please.
too, Russia said they were going to take Kyiv and conquer Ukraine in 3 days. And now we're almost 3 years into that 3 days, and Ukraine's still fighting, and they're still doing what they can. But also, too, earlier, I mean, Russia's. I feel like if we don't provide substantial security to Ukraine, which I feel is NATO membership, they will invade again. And I have this analysis because they already did. Right? They put their troops in Donbass and Crimea in 2014, and what did they do 8 years later? Full scale invaded. It didn't go how they expected, but I don't want to play with that again. I don't want to give Russia another opportunity to invade because it will be even bigger than this one. Because of their actions prior leading up to this.
I'm fair enough. This was also talked about in the interview a little bit. They talked about the ceasefire agreement, I believe it was, in 2019. Am I getting the date right? Where Zelensky
Mm-hmm.
met with Putin, and they tried to
Minsk,
hash
you
out a
mean, right?
deal.
In
Go ahead.
Normandy
You can.
format he talked about.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
could.
I'm glad he brought it up because this is like a Vatnik thing that people bring up all the time about Minsk, and they also bring it up in the sense that oh, everyone just broke everything, and Ukraine side was doing that bad shit, like Russia was doing bad shit, and I like that Zelensky put like a pin on that because it was us who was doing like almost Minsk was an insult, okay? It was an insult to Ukrainian people. It was Germany. Thank fuck he called out Merkel, by the way. I was
Yeah.
so hyped when he called out.
Oh,
I
are
was
we
like,
are we talking
yes,
about not letting Merkel's vetoing Ukraine get into NATO back in 2008 ish?
basically, yeah,
That, but
because
also the gas too.
Okay,
yeah,
carry
the
on.
gas thing, everything. Like he just called that bitch out, and I'm like so happy about it because yeah. But anyhow, point is that I hate her like with passion, as most people here do. But point is that because she shoulders a lot of blame. Like people like blame with United States a lot for not even participating in Minsk properly, and Obama and his like leadership that was very poor, so to speak, when it comes to like Ukraine and everything. And that's all well and good, but people rarely bring up fucking Germany and Merkel doing like everything they possibly could for that cheap gas, for that juicy cheap North Pipe, and basically selling out our country as a whole for that, right? Because pressure was immense on us at the time. The Europe was pressuring us hardcore, like just roll over, give them everything they want, like they will not go further, it's so chill and good, and it's just we have been lied and backstabbed so many times that I cannot possibly imagine what needs to happen for Ukrainians to be like, yeah, we believe you guys. You will defend us next time. Like it would be suicidal. Like it would be like
Well,
incredibly stupid.
on that
Yeah.
note,
So I
on that note, actually, of Europeans and Ukrainians, the Western Europeans, I'm more speaking to, right? Like there is understandably a huge loss of trust on the Ukrainian side for um, the Western Europeans and their unwillingness to kind of defend Ukraine when it's needed. How do we repair that trust?
I mean, we are very silly, honestly, Ukrainians. We like forgive everything. Like, all the time, historically. I don't know what is it. It's something in the water, maybe in Dnipro River or something. Because we like let go of literally everything. I don't know why. Like most people hold grudges for like so many, and
Yeah.
people were like so hyped about the Europe and the America. Like Dylan, for example, it was like first time we actually did anything together. I think in Ukraine. Do you remember Dylan when you were like in Saltivka? In Kharkiv, and
Mm-hmm.
we met that old dude there that was like, I lost my
I
everything
do.
is like
Yes, I do remember. I do
yeah,
remember.
and he was like bowing to Dylan. He was like doing this essentially because Dylan was American, and it was so strange to see because of the old people in this country were not brought up thinking America is cool. Let me tell you that, right? Because of the Soviet Union situation, most people have a pretty bad opinion of the American people, right? And to me, it's such a loss, like on American part, to be honest, on the American politics, because you could have yourself a little Albania, like Kosovo, building statues to Clinton and things like that. You could have had that. You could have had a Biden statue or some shit. You could have in Ukraine. You could have
There's still
people who are
time,
so
okay?
like, there. I guess,
Well,
but yeah, so
maybe.
that would be so like loyal and so incredibly like loving of the United States because of that help. Because when you're in a situation like we are, people still love fucking Boris Johnson to this day, and he didn't do like that much, but he was just yeah, go Ukraine, fuck
And he was
Putin,
there too, and he showed
and
up.
he was there. Yeah, and he was there in the beginning, walking the streets, and everyone is still like, "Yeah, Boris is a cool dude." So it's just so easy to buy people's love in a situation like that with just a little like crumbs, right? Like crumbs of help, and it was wasted, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm just. I don't know. I think it's a big loss on
Fair
United
enough.
States part too, because people are so dejected now. When you
Mm.
speak about the United States, and they're like, "Ugh," they're not really.
We did
They
fail.
don't.
We failed you.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie. As
yeah.
the strongest American soldier ever to be born or to have lived. Yes. America. It's a, it's a dark mark. It's a dark mark on our
Yeah,
legacy. It's a stain on our reputation, and unfortunately, this is going to have geopolitical impacts well beyond just Ukraine. Taiwan is looking at America and what they do right now, because obviously China has been making saber rattling towards Taiwan for a while now. So yeah, I think that people don't understand. And Zelensky compared Ukraine to a wall, and I think that's maybe a better comparison would be a domino. It's a domino, and if it falls, there's going to be a lot of other things that fall too. If Ukraine falls, right? If Russia just entirely gets their way here, it's going to be the first of many things to go very, very wrong very, very quickly for geopolitical stability in the world. So yeah.
Wall is kind of a meme, to be honest. That's probably why he said it. It's our meme that we are the wall, like between the the orcs and the elves.
Europe, yeah.
The elves are
That's the Trump,
Europeans. Yeah, also the Trump thing. Yeah, but the wall is like a long going meme that we are like basically like kind of like a there's like this Mordor thing, right? Russia, and there is like so we are like basically Minas Tirith, which is a city of people between elves and the orcs.
Lord of the Rings,
So
let's
we are
go.
yeah, a lot of the Rings stuff, but we are at the wall technically between the west and the east. It's our geographical position, as it has been, always. So it's yeah, but yeah. Anyhow, you just asked how to restore that trust, and I honestly don't know. Like maybe
That's a
if
fair
they
answer.
just actually they would be like throwing everything they have at us and like have 200 billion or something of Russian frozen assets right now, which we should actually have access to. I don't know why the hell we still haven't gotten that, but have this like equipment, have this, have that, and maybe people will be like, well, it took them a long time, but they got there at the end. Maybe there will be this sort of attitude because Ukrainians are pretty forgiven as far as people go. So I could see like them becoming like Trump fans if or America friends if Trump actually do some active effort to help Ukraine, which would be cringe for me because I don't like him. Okay, but if he helped me, okay, I would build a statue in my own house and I would kiss it every day.
Just
I
show
would
up
do
at
anything.
show up at Trump International Kyiv, right? You
I
just go
would.
there
I
and go.
would be. I would buy like a bronzer or whatever, like it's called, the thing that makes you orange that Americans love. Like I would buy the self tanner. I would like honor my king. Okay, I'll be just like him. I will dye my hair different color, the color of something. I don't know what the hell is
Red,
that
white, and
color
blue,
is.
of course, right? You
Yeah,
get the MAGA hat
Amer-
going. I get it.
Yes,
America,
anything. America, eagles fly and everything.
buy a few Trump Bibles.
Trump,
Yeah.
the
I will
shoes,
hold it
all that.
upside down. I will hold it upside down, just like him. I will like do everything like my king does. Okay, if he helps, anything.
I
But
do have a
I don't know.
question. I do have a question for the Americans or American adjacent. Andrew. You're not European, are you, or Canadian?
No,
Okay, you're
Nope.
good. Good. Too many Canadians.
Might
okay?
seem it like it sometimes.
we're about to It's about to be our 51st state.
um,
Oh,
because I think that you'll be able to answer this actually better than Ana will. When I watched the interview, I watched it with family members who had voted for Trump, and I was asking them and kind of trying to gauge like a before and after, right? Like, how do you feel about Zelensky before? How do you feel about him now, right? And to see if it kind of it moved minds, changed anything. Anecdotal, but the ones I talked to do have a much more positive view of Zelensky now. So my question to you both is, do you think that the Lex interview here of Zelensky, do you think it's going to move the needle at all in America among the more red-leaning, MAGA adjacent style people here? What do we realistically think?
I don't think so. Like on a grand scheme, I mean, anecdotally, maybe like you showed it to your parents. If like you bring it to MAGA people, or like if you show it to them and they watch it, then like they like in my chat, for example, I had a few in my chat that said, "Oh, I see Zelensky differently now." Anecdotal, but they were here watching my stream. The grand scheme of it, though, I don't know. And again, it depends on if a source is going to play this interview and let it be heard without interjecting really, or like I don't know. It depends on the audience if it's going to reach the certain audience. I don't know if Lex did enough on his own to make sure this is going to happen again because of all the languages but
Fair.
it depends if it's played in that type of a crowd to do it. But also how I know Zelensky glazing Trump a little bit up in this interview might help a little bit, because if Trump's going to continue to
That
support
actually
Ukraine,
is what my family said what their favorite parts was.
I'm sure
wow,
it was. I'm
Zelensky
sure
really
it
thinks that
was.
Trump
I
is
already
strong.
know it was.
I'm just
Yes.
saying, like,
I know. Yep. So that will work. It depends, but and it depends on Trump's position on Ukraine when he's like in office, and like how he can move them. Because if he says something is base, most of them will go with it no matter what. I mean, we're getting some issues, and that's a whole different topic with the immigration stuff and Elon. But if it's Trump saying it, though, I think they'll go with it. Like if he says we're supporting Ukraine now, I think there will be some pushback to it. But then that might open the opportunity to, hey, let's go watch that Lex Fridman now. Let's go watch it now, and then they'll get the information still after the fact. But it really depends on the direction Trump takes it with his messaging specifically and his actions as he takes office here in a few days. That's will depend on if we're really moving the MAGA base to be more supportive of Ukraine. There are for sure people in MAGA, onesie and twosies, that definitely support Ukraine. For sure, I have them in my community, but the majority still are believing the Russian propaganda narratives, or they just don't care, or they're more focused on immigration or inflation, etc. So I think it really depends on Trump and his messaging as he takes office.
thoughts from Dylan? I'm curious.
I mean, I think it might have like a few percentage point effect. I think the people who are dead set against Ukraine are very, very pro-Russia because they've really bought into the Russian propaganda. I don't think this is going to have that much of an effect on them. But I think that there's a lot of people who have a vague sense of animosity towards Ukraine and towards Zelensky. And it's based in this idea that Ukraine in some way has taken something that was theirs, that they're in a desperate situation, and that Ukraine's benefiting while, we're sitting back, and it's just all going to be money laundered and all spent by this comedian dude. And I think by sitting down, having him explain the country's position, explain the history a little bit between the two countries, humanize Zelensky, as well as showing that he's not saying Trump is a racist, moron, knuckle-dragging, window-licking, doorknob sucker. He is saying that Donald Trump actually has an IQ point. And like if by doing that, by doing all these things together, if you can come away from this being like, oh, well, maybe I don't have as much of an animosity. It's like almost as if, let's say you're just introduced to an issue, and your first introduction to an issue is like, oh my God, cucumbers are terrible for you. What are you doing eating cucumbers? Oh my God, stop that. Are you fucking insane? And then the next person's like, yeah, I love cucumbers. They're really nice for you. They're really good. By the end of that, you might not love cucumbers or hate you might just be like, okay, maybe my first assumption wasn't exactly what I thought it was, and you can die down that animosity that I think could be useful in trying to stop people from, say, harassing congressmen if they happen to support an aid package to Ukraine, if that comes around, and in a new supplemental package in a few months, which is a real possibility, since the likelihood of a deal being made in the next 14 days, as Trump promised on the campaign trail,
24 hours.
Ever less likely.
You had your hand up?
No, I just
Trump. Is
Trump.
that a like?
He
wow.
promised 24 hours he was going to fix
Yeah.
that.
Fair enough,
I'm thinking of doing a 24-hour stream the moment he puts his hand on the Bible and says, I'm going to not be what I was 4 years ago. I promise this time. But I think I'll
Only
start
if it's upside down.
Yeah.
If the Bible is upside down, it might work. Otherwise, no. It's just that doesn't do the trick.
One of the things that again, the people I saw it with, one of the things they mentioned that kind of stood out to me was they said that going into it, they saw Zelensky as a grifter, who was stealing their money, right? Taking money that could have been given to them and to American interests, and instead just, stealing it. But one of Zelensky's answers actually swayed them on this point. Zelensky mentioned how he compared corruption to lobbying. And this is something they bid on and understood immediately. And they're like, oh, lobbying. I know a lot of special interests in America who steal stuff all the time, right? And that helped them to kind of grasp the situation in their mind, right? And kind of understand what the issues were and how it wasn't something where Zelensky was stealing the money, but it was more of kind of like a every country is lobbying. Every country is kind of like this low level type of maybe corruption's not the right word here, but this whole the kind it actually moved them. It's not the answer I thought would move them, honestly. If I were picking out what were Zelensky's best points, that wouldn't have been one of them. But it was one that they mentioned unprompted, right? So fair enough, right?
I think it's
Go ahead.
because it connects back to a lot of the media they consume, and a lot of the media they consume is telling them that America is sending your money off to Ukraine. Like, it could be spent at the border to stop the invasion at the border. So don't know how HIMARS and NASAMS and Abrams could stop the border, but that's what they believe. So they're told that we can't afford eggs. Ukraine's getting all of our money, and American people can't afford eggs. So that's where a lot of the animosity was built, because this media that they're consuming is telling them this. And I pay attention to Ukraine every single day, so I've seen Zelensky openly talk about corruption many times, but he's been transparent about it. That's what does help Ukraine, is that they are open and transparent about it. But having Lex interview him, and again, maybe a little exposure to this other audience, this niche MAGA or even tanky type audience, maybe, could hear Zelensky speak about this openly, and that it's not a secret, or they're not trying to hide any of this from anyone. It's an active process.
Fair enough. A couple more questions, and I want to respect everyone's time here, right? I know we got things to do, places to be. What do we think? What expectations do we have of a Lex Putin interview? Because he says in the video at the end that he still plans to do that. He plans to go to Moscow, sit down with Putin, and also interview him. What are our expectations on how that's going to go in terms of questioning, pushback, or no pushback, whatever, and how the expectations of how that's going to be received? Go ahead. I want to hear from Ana first, and then the rest of you. Yeah.
I honestly kind of feel like it's a bit of a conflicted thing. I hate that he's going to do this, and I also despise him for presenting this like an equal situation. He always does it. Like, there's just like two sides. We need to hear two sides, right? He did this, and many other people like him. They use this two sides thing to platform actual Russian paid shills and Russian propaganda to the millions of his audience. And I'm obviously not happy for him for doing that with Putin in some sense. And I also blame him and people like him, and Elon and people like him, for always memeing and reposting things about Zelensky being a grifter, stealing their money, the best money laundering operation, all of that. They do that all the time, and it's their audience thinks that because of them, because of their influence. So I super don't like that. But when it comes to his questioning, he did try to sort of like push this stupid peace thing all the time with this interview. But I wouldn't even call this pushback, because it was just so silly in the face of what Zelensky was saying, that I think it actually helped Zelensky. Didn't make. I don't think he would make my prediction. He would not make any sort of questions to Putin that so many people are dying, you send in your people to die. I don't think he will bring that literally at all. That's my
Do you
my
think he'll make
prediction.
the peace the same whole, you guys got to just
No.
hug it out thing? You
No.
don't think he's going to do that with
No,
Putin?
no.
Okay.
I don't think he will do that. Yeah, so that's one thing. But that's also I don't know, it's overused word, but to me it's very abusive that this is only brought up to us, the victims, not the perpetrator. But it's like a whole other thing. I don't think he will do that, and I think it will be the most soft bullshit you ever saw on the place of the earth. But also, it's Lex. His interviews are kind of like that. It's not like he like pushbacks at all to anything. Like, mostly he's just what do you think about this? And he's like, does the enlightened Russian look, and then the person talks, right? He mostly just the person talks, and Lex asking some questions, right? So I think he will do this with Putin. But the only thing I'm happy about is that Putin will make himself look like a genocidal idiot. Oh, not idiot, sorry, genocidal lunatic, like evil fuck by himself. He doesn't need Lex's help. So I think that will be good in the sense of the contrast. Because Zelensky came off as very human, as very personable. He actually sweared a lot, which I didn't expect. But
I like that.
props to him, I guess. But it represents Ukrainians pretty well, to be honest. We swear a lot, so he was very. Even if you hate him, he came off as very humanly and personable, and he came off as, in my opinion, he's a quite charming dude. He knows like how to play the audience as well. He's like, he's always been like that. It's not like his president quality, it's just his person quality, right? And Putin is a frozen ghoul. Like he's the least personable thing you have seen in your life, which Tucker interview I think proved, right? And I expect him to go off on the Rurik, and and the history of Russia, and I expect him to do all of that. And I hope, in the contrast to Zelensky, it will come off even poorly. So that's my hope. Like I don't hope Lex will do anything to show him as an evil fuck he is, but I think he will do it himself. So that's my hope for this interview, at least.
Okay, what are some other
Yeah,
thoughts here?
yeah, like Anna said, I mean, the interview, I didn't like Lex's questions that much, but like Zelensky made it a listenable interview. It made it nice because of Zelensky's responses and the way he engaged. You wouldn't get that at all with Putin. I mean, the Tucker interview, I didn't like Tucker at all, but I'm listening to it because it's Putin, and even that was terrible. I was just, I wanted to go to bed. I was like, and I hate Putin, but I didn't want to listen to it anymore. Not even just like trying to listen to see if there's anything in there. I was over it. I don't care about 9th century Russia. I'm not here for that. I'm here to see how Putin's brain is working on this thing, but there's nothing there really. He's just cooked in imperialism forever and ever. So I don't even know if, and then they're going to do it in Russian, obviously, and then no, it's just going to be even a less audience. I just don't see how it would even approach the success of the Zelensky interview, I'd say, or the amount of people it would reach. I mean, people would probably just talk about it on X. Elon Musk will share it, and everyone will share it all. Tucker will share it all, but will people really watch it? That's the other. I think even less people would watch that one than this. Maybe the view count would be good because they'd watch the first couple minutes just to give it a view, but I don't think they're going to spend the whole time even watching the whole thing.
Do we know the view count on the? I don't recall off the top of my head the Tucker Carlson Putin interview. How many views did that
I
get?
don't remember.
I didn't look. He's got 2.3 at least when I checked on Zelensky. Lex Fridman does.
Oh yeah, for the
2.3 million.
Zelensky's Lex, 2.3-ish is what I saw. And honestly, on that note, I was looking at the comments because I was a little worried, to be honest with you. But the comments are actually pretty good. They're actually pretty pro Zelensky in this. I didn't see too many bots, if you will. So fair enough.
I think it's because it's credit to Zelensky, like Anna said. He was very humanable. He swore, like he wasn't like this politician person, right? That's like he was pretty, like he was spinning in his chair a little bit. He turned sideways, he was like being a regular person, how you would. And I think that appeals to a lot of the crowd that needs it.
Some things he said, I listened to the original, so it was better than translated, obviously, right? But sometimes he would like just come up with pretty strong like swearing, and I was like, not because I don't swear, but because he's a president, and you would rarely see a president do that. And I was like, the bare-assed comment just took me the fuck out. It was so funny because he was like, when you speak with like a Westerner, like essentially like a Musk person, right? And he's like all about the progress, all about building the rockets, all about this. And you speak with Putin, he's like, Rurik in 1918. The boys, bare-assed barbarians start in tribalism, and it's just so on Paul. He was like pontificating like about tribes, and and then he called him a mem. It was just pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. I was impressed with my guy. I'm not a big Zelensky simp, to be honest, but I'm just in that particular moment I was like, you're doing good, buddy. And when he brought lobbying, I was like, the American MAGAs are gonna like that. Good job. So yeah, I was like, I knew what he was doing at that point, I guess. Yeah, but just we didn't speak about this, I believe, about actual Lex, and his questioning and everything. To me, I don't like him, obviously, because he blocked literally every Ukrainian on earth. Like, there's not a single Ukrainian on Twitter that he hasn't blocked. But his comment section is full of Russian propaganda that he doesn't block. So free speech for them, but not free speech for Ukraine, obviously, as it is. But I don't like them because of that primarily, and him platforming Tucker Carlson and saying he's the best journalist in the world. That I also don't appreciate. But that besides,
Did he really say that? Did he really say
yes,
that?
that's what I criticized about him. When Tucker did Russian Putin interview, he wrote that it's so brave and courageous and it's amazing. Tucker Carlson is showing what real journalism is like, a real hero essentially of journalism. And I posted a
Mm.
Twitter comment that I said that it's very naive. I didn't even insult the guy. I was like, it's very naive of him to think that there's any freedom of speech in Russia to be for this interview to be he said the victory of freedom of speech. And I was like, there's nothing victorious about a highly coordinated Putin interview. There's not going to be. He will not ask you many questions that Putin will not, appreciate that much. And also, and I said that as someone from Russia who was born in Russia and who still has family in Russia, right? You know that. You know how Russia operates, how the media operates, how the state media operates. It's not. It's further staying away from freedom of speech possible, right? And he blocked the fuck out of me for that. So I don't know. Like it's just it's his right, obviously, to block anyone he wants. It's his Twitter. I
I
don't
can't
mind.
speak to his blocking. Like I don't block
Yeah,
people. That's just me. But
literally every Ukrainian on Twitter is blocked by Lex. Like everyone I know, like all my friends on Twitter that are Ukrainian or like pro-Ukraine, blocked everyone. Not every single one. Not a single one is unblocked at this point. So I don't appreciate that. I think it's hypocritical from a free speech guy, right? But they all are like that. So at this point, I'm not surprised. But just his questions, though, if to speak about the questions, I just think it was so NPC in a sense that Zelensky would be like, this, because of the Minsk, of the Normandy, of the Budapest Memorandum, he brought up history, he brings up actual facts, he goes both in logic and in emotion, right? He says like this is emotionally horrible, but this also logically doesn't make any sense to just accept any sort of peace without any ceasefire this, ceasefire that, right? And then Lex listens to all of that for like 15 minutes, and then he's like, I have a dream that you, Putin, and Trump will sit down together and reach peace. And Zelensky's like, brother, like I spoke
You just spent a
10
half
minutes
hour, yeah.
about how it's not in the next bit. Zelensky's like this, and that, and a lot of stuff is brought up. And he's like, what say you, Mr. Fedotov? And Lex is like, well, I have a dream. A feeling,
He
really.
did that like 5 times.
Yeah,
It's the worst.
that Putin wants to speak. And Zelensky is like, how do you know he wants negotiations? Have you spoke with him or something, like on the phone maybe or something? And Lex is like, no, I haven't spoke with him, but I have a feeling though that he is very willing to stop the war. But that was, in my opinion, it was just showed that contrast between those two like so much that I think it was very favorable
Two
for
comments.
Zelensky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
two comments on this.
Mhm.
And again, I like Lex. Full disclosure, I like him. I think he's cool.
Okay,
I think
wait.
that fair.
We all like different things, you know.
Sure. We
True,
different strokes,
true.
different folks. One,
We all have our kinks, okay? It's all right.
yes. You can say it's naive, but Lex really does believe that peace is possible, and he really does believe that his work and his interviews and speaking to both Zelensky and Putin can have a positive impact. He doesn't believe it's going to fix it right overnight, but he is honest in his belief. So I'll give him that. The second one, more pragmatically, sometimes when you do an interview, you tee things up for people, right? You hit them with you put it out there and you expect them to hit a home run with it, right? Zelensky hit home runs all night because Lex fielded him those teed up questions, those teed up things. We wouldn't have gotten as good of answers from Zelensky if Lex didn't ask the questions he did. I'll just say that.
I mean, do
you guys
think
can
that?
disagree,
Like,
but that's my stance.
Yeah, Anna, you go first. Anna, go first.
Lex didn't do pretty much anything. That's the best part about this interview. that he didn't do anything. He just let Zelensky go off essentially. Which, I mean, to be fair to Lex, it's what he does with like most of his, most of people he interviews, because his interviews are not confrontational, which is what I hate about them. So, but I have to admit, right, that he doesn't do it with most people. It's not like he specifically like was any different than he usually is with
Yeah,
Zelensky. He
I've
was
never seen
actually
him go for dunks, for example.
yeah,
I've just never
he's
seen
actually
him.
I think he was a little bit more actually confrontational with Zelensky when he was with like Tucker Carlson, which is the one I watched. His interview with Tucker, and yeah. So I'm not like, but I don't think we give any credit to Lex about his questions because they were atrocious. But it's the answers that Zelensky gave that were good, and the fact that he didn't interrupt him, which is something he doesn't do in general, like in all of his interviews. So I can give credit for the interview itself, like that he made it, that I can do, right? But not the fact that he somehow made it good by his questions, or
Fair enough.
because it was like I think Zelensky lost a little bit of patience with him at the end, to be honest, when he repeated like the "I have a dream" 5 times. I watched it in original, so I saw it a bit easier to hear the emotional bits, and he was like being a little bit more. Also, if you see like a Ukrainian person started gesticulate more, like doing gestures more, they get agitated.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
he started very very passive, and then he
That's,
started to
that's when he was like sideways sitting by the end of it. He was just getting
yeah.
antsy.
He was getting more movement there, and I understand why, because it's I'm Greek, and also I'm more I have more gestures and things like that
Mm.
than usually Ukrainians do. But Ukrainians usually like quite like this when they speak. And then if they start really get a lot of movement in, they're like agitated, not in a bad way necessarily, but
Sure.
they're either hyped or they're like very angry or something is going on, right?
Passionate.
Yeah.
Let's say.
Yeah, you add like a lot of movement in your stoic Slav body, I guess you could say,
Fair enough.
and that's so I don't compliment Lex on that. I just
Fair enough.
compliment him on the interview itself.
We're not
So-
here to glaze. We're not here to shield anyone from
Mhm.
criticism. We have different opinions, and that's okay. But carry on. I want to hear from the rest of you. Andrew, you were trying to get in? Yeah.
Yeah, regarding the questions, I guess like by proxy, because they're like Russian talking points, and like obviously Ukrainians are well equipped to answer all of those like very quickly. So maybe by proxy, but it wasn't like softball in the sense of like here's an easy interview. Zelensky, only pro-Ukraine stuff, like completely. It was just he was hitting them with like corruption and the elections and like just things that like clearly some energy there with that. But also like when Zelensky would explain something and spend a half hour explaining it and so eloquently that everybody can understand, no matter who it was, then one of the times Lex was like, well, those are some great ideas, but here's some alternate ideas. It's like, what are you doing? Like, or like sounds like alternate facts. That's what I heard. It was like that type of an energy. Or also too, like, when we're talking about Ukrainian security guarantees, he goes, well, what about the Russian guarantees? I'm like,
That one, that's the only one I really, really hated.
yeah, that
was
sucked.
just disgusting. Yeah, that's the only thing I can
Well,
say.
Zelensky answered that perfectly, though.
Mhm.
NATO
he did, yeah.
membership for Ukraine guarantees Russia safety as well. I mean, that's the correct answer.
But that's the thing, though. It's what they do. People like Lex, right? They show the situation as equal, as if
Mhm.
we're a threat to them at any point, or NATO, because it's
Mhm.
Russian narrative, right? That the NATO is this, like, which Zelensky answers. It's a defensive alliance. Nobody attacked fucking Russia. Russia is the biggest country on earth, right? So nobody will do that, right? Obviously, but still, it's just him trying to push for this narrative. Just that Zelensky, thankfully, addressed all of that. But yeah, he was still trying to push the thing that that he usually does, and I don't like him hiding beneath the "I'm unbiased, I just want peace" thing, because he has an agenda, and I see it. So I'm not blind, okay? I know you may be glamorized by a soulful Russian dude, but I'm not. I'm like
Fair
the
enough.
glamour doesn't work on me. Like I see like that there is opinion there and there is a position there, and yeah, and peace is a very useful word. You can say it and anyone interprets it however they want, right? You can say peace and someone would be, just Ukraine surrenders. In World War II, they were easy to achieve peace. If nobody fought Hitler, there would be peace, right? Immediately. No war, right? But can you really say that that was be peace? Because he would, like, for example, kill all Jews on the planet and half the Slavic population and enslave the other half. But war will be stopped. So yeah, it's just very useful word that people can twist and use however they want, and people think of different things than when they hear peace, the word itself. So I think Lex knows that. He's not dumb. I don't think he's dumb. I think he's smart enough to know exactly what he's doing, but that's a whole other situation with him. Yeah.
Fair enough. Dylan, did
We
you have
shall
any?
see.
Yeah, we shall see. Dylan, do you
Mhm.
have any thoughts on this? Go ahead.
I think a lot of times when sometimes with foreigners are talking about peace in Ukraine, they don't necessarily want the type of peace where nobody terrorizes them at their home, nobody will necessarily be able to shoot them or take them away or throw them into prison. They want the peace of mind of having it out of the headlines, to put it bluntly.
True.
So I have a few things I want to say because I didn't get to answer the what I think the Putin interview will go like.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overlook you. My apologies. My bad. Go ahead.
No
Answer
worries.
both.
I think Putin will try to dominate like Zelensky did, because I think part of the reason why this interview was so good is because Zelensky really knew how to fill the air quite well, where he filled up that space perfectly, and that's something that I give Lex a lot of credit for, where a lot of times I feel like people kind of dominate the conversation, be like, yeah, that reminds me of a story when so and so happened to me. Like, he doesn't do that. He'll usually set, even if you don't like the question, once he sets up the question, he'll let you go. If you want to reframe it, you can reframe it, etc. And so if Putin's given that opportunity and he's asked something like, well, let's talk about what happened in Euromaidan. So did these gangs get hired? And he's like, well, I think what you really need to talk about is what happened with, Catherine the Great, and what the type of, and that's what I think Putin will probably try to do. Both because that's his nature and because I think he's an obsessive Redditor. I also think Putin is probably going to be humanized, and it's much in the same way that we got the Zelensky conversation about his parents and their background and what his, grandfather was like. We might get that with Putin's parents. We might get the 20-minute spiel about what
It's happening.
Mama
It's
Putin
coming. I'm
and
predicting
Papa
it.
Putin, did to raise him, and how Uncle Putin taught him all the best torture techniques or whatever. So you're probably going to get a lot of that. But I don't think he's going to take the national story of Russia as well as Zelensky told the national story of Ukraine. He's not as good of a national storyteller. He's a national storyteller in the same way that you would read a historical record. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Where when Zelensky talks, a lot of it is more like this happened, therefore this happened, which caused us to have to do this. And I feel like he's much better of a storyteller, nationally speaking, when explaining the Ukrainian story. Yeah? Anna?
I have to disagree with you a little bit because he's not doing the history, this happened and this happened. It's a Russian version of history that he's doing. So
Revisionism.
he has a narrative that he pushes and that narrative he actually goes, like you said, bit by bit, like certain events.
I'm not saying that it's history,
Just
but
false. It just false as well.
It's not
good
necessarily
he's
true.
Good at telling the false story. That's what I'm getting at. But it's not that I didn't say it's a false story. I guess I just assumed everyone would look at it as a false story. But he's very bad at retelling that false narrative. Outside of that, I think he'll be vague in response to the peace signaling that Lex is going to do. He's going to be like, "Oh, why don't we have peace? I have a dream. I have a dream that little Ukrainian boys and little Russian girls can come together and etc. whatever." And I think Putin is probably going to be like, "We've always been ready for peace. What do you mean we've always been ready for peace? It is whether the authorities in Washington are ready to come and negotiate peace, because the authorities in Kiev," and he'll probably make the same offer of, "We don't want to negotiate with the Ukrainians. We want to negotiate above their heads some deal to partition Europe," and it'll be the same thing as always. And I think Lex won't really know what to do about it. He'll either accept it the first time or get the same response over and over and over and over again, because I don't think he's going to get him to budge. I don't think it's going to be Lex Fridman that pulls it off. I do hope, there is two things I hope for it. I hope, I'm going to check to see if Lex asks for concessions from Putin in the same way that he asked for concessions from Zelensky. Because if he just has Zelensky saying like, "Oh, I'm going to give up this land. Oh, I'm going to give up this, horrible thing for my nation." If you go to Putin and it's just Putin making demands, then it's the Ukrainians talk about concessions and the Russians get to push their demands. All you're doing is basically airing out a Russian list of demands of what Ukraine. No, you're going to have to ask them, what are you willing to give the Ukrainians? Are you going to give them back the rest of Kherson Oblast? Are you going to give them? That's the type of stuff I want to hear Lex bring up. I don't think he's going to, if I'm being blunt with you, but I would like to see if he does that.
Well, actually, we have a good chance. Again, Lex Fridman watches my show. He does regularly.
I hope he doesn't. I hope. I would give him credit if he did it.
I would ask you all, right? He is going to interview Putin. What would you like Lex to ask Putin? And I'll message him. I'll say, "Hey, look, these are what people want you to ask Putin, and you can actually get some input here." Go ahead.
Literally everything I will say will never be asked, but whatever. Oh my God, where do you start with that one? To be honest with
You
you,
get one
a
like
big
one
one.
of
question. I
the
mean, I don't want to give him
y-
like an
y-
hour-long presentation, right? To like, he's not gonna watch that, right? But if
yeah,
I
yeah,
can
yeah,
give
yeah.
him a clip
Just you can probably
of you
imagine how
guys,
many
yeah,
thoughts I have of the man. Okay,
yeah.
so it's quite difficult to me for choose like I would ask probably why actual they have their own version of why they invaded Ukraine, but I would ask him directly like what exactly was the threat that Ukraine presented towards Russia, and how on earth is justified what they did, because like what's kind of precedent or history there is of Ukraine and NATO, even you can merge both, to be honest, represented towards Russia realistically, and how can you possibly justify what they did other than just their imperialist expansionism. That's probably one of the main reasons things I would ask.
Look, that's a good question. What about you, Andrew? What would you, if you could whisper into Lex's ear and say, "Hey, Lex, you should ask this." What would it be?
How does he sleep at night?
All right, he sleeps just fine. He will answer. Yeah,
I
bro did
I
nothing wrong.
I like in terms of like serious questions like what are you? I mean, we already brought up how what we're bringing concessions to Putin. Whether we think Lex is going to, I don't think in terms of you brought it to Ukraine and you brought it to Zelensky about what they have to give up. Like, what is Russia willing to give up? I just don't think he's going to do that. But that'd be the only interesting questions I'd want. Like, what is Russia willing to give up? What is Russia willing to commit? What is Russia going to do to change? But again, I think we're in a different reality of that, and that is impossible. But I'm always willing to be proven wrong. I love that. I would love to be proven wrong. And if he's listening, please, at least engage with Putin the way you did Zelensky. I don't know. Like that's the best I got probably for that.
Fair enough. And I think Dylan already gave us his question, unless he wants to change that, right?
What was my question to Putin?
You would ask him, "Are you willing to give up things like the oblast? Are you going to give that back,
Yeah,
etc.?"
concessions
Right?
basically.
Yeah.
What
And
the
Oh, I mean,
territorial
like, I
concession.
think like there's a basic question. I mean, I would also, I mean, I'd want him to ask him about the human safari in Kherson. It's probably one of the most blatant, ongoing Russian war crimes of just like Russian soldiers hunting old babushka women for sport to like train their drones. This is like horrid, and this is the type of thing
It
that
never
only
happened.
really, this is the only type of stuff that quiets down if it becomes a problem for them. This isn't the type of stuff where it's just like one day they're gonna start feeling bad. So the more attention on it, the better. I'd also be interested to ask him like, do you think it's possible to denazify soldiers with Nazi military units like Grusich? I would like to just see. I would really love to see him just be like,
Spicy.
so
I
this
like
guy right
that.
here, this neo-Nazi, you guys gave him a gun and sent him to invade Ukraine to fight, the people you fought the Nazis with. How does this guy bring about, the end of Nazism in Ukraine? I'd love to see something like that. There's a few things. I mean, I could do this all day, but I'll stop.
Oh, I got
Yeah.
one. I got one, Wick. How do you? So if one of the pretexts of your invasion was NATO expansionism, how do you feel about Finland and Sweden? And Finland's right on Russia's border.
That's a good
And that
question.
was that.
One.
Well, what drama with that, right? They joined no problem. It's already been
Yeah.
2 years now. When did they join? 2 years ago? 1 year ago?
Not only that, they
Andrew.
also took troops from the border. 80% of the troops they brought back. So it's almost as if it's less of a threat now.
Yeah, because it's not. They of course know. They know.
Mhm.
What I actually kind of am always impressed by Russians, right?
Please.
My family in Russia as well, is that they all know all of that. So it's
Mhm.
only Americans who buy that shit. If you speak to an actual Russian, never ever will they actually seriously, not on camera, but like in a personal conversation, say, "Oh yeah, we were super afraid Finland is gonna attack us. Mm, we can't sleep at night in fear of Finland attacking us." Not a single person will say that. So it's just very very funny to see Americans, and especially people like Lex, to bring up the security concerns, because that's just every single person in Russia knows that's bullshit.
Well,
So
yeah,
if you
that's
ask them,
yeah. No,
they'll
carry
be
on.
like, we want them to fear us. They want to be afraid. They want to know we're strong. We want to know we can do anything we want with them. That's what we want, and that's what Russians say usually when you ask them. They say we want to project strength. We want to be like feared all over the world, but they never say we want to be feared and strong because we're afraid people will actually attack us. I never heard that, not from my relatives, not from anyone. They think it's important to be like the feared thing in the world because they want it as a symbol of their fortitude, of their strength. They want to return to that time in Soviet Union when everyone treated them as a superpower as well. That's something you will hear quite a bit from them.
Mm.
But yeah, but I just never heard anyone actually ask in all seriousness of Russian. To be fair, like most people don't speak with Putin, obviously, right? There's no foreign like attacker doesn't fucking count. That was a glaze session, and also Tucker. Yeah, so that's just he never asked anything. Actually, poor Tucker though, he was like trying to talk about trans bathrooms and
Yeah, he wanted
degeneracy.
culture war
Yeah,
talking.
yeah, he wanted, and
Didn't get it.
Putin was like a
We didn't
Rurik,
get it. Yeah.
Rurik. So that's in 1918, right? So it was quite difficult, obviously. I don't think Lex's interview will be like that because probably Lex is not like as blatant, obviously, as Tucker Carlson in his agenda, and I don't think he's like paid by Russia or anything. Like at least that's my opinion. Like people have different opinions, but I think Tucker obviously is. But Lex doesn't come up to me that way. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Tenet media situation will pop up in a couple of weeks, right? Nobody knows. But yeah, for now, it's not my opinion of him at least. So yeah, so I don't know, but I don't think he will ask any of that, to be honest, and not even because he doesn't want to, maybe, but because I would be. I don't
You
know
think
if
there's
even
gonna be
I would
fear?
in his position. I mean, yeah, it's fucking Putin. Like it's
No, I mean
not to be
fair.
yeah, I mean not to be that guy, but it's just I'm not saying he will throw Lex out of the window or feed him like poison tea or some shit, but it's just quite difficult to even like it's not something that it will be allowed.
One
That like
thing,
Put
they
it
will
this,
yeah.
check.
I'll
One,
put it
Yeah,
this way,
go.
Wick. My good friend, well, my better friend now, John Sweeney, who used to work at the BBC. He's a reporter. He was in Kyiv. He confronted Putin with questions, like direct questions that we're asking you that we want to hear, and he got pulled aside and he got hit, like physically hit, and that wasn't on camera,
Russia,
but he got pulled
Russia.
away and got hit by Putin's bodyguards, and because he confronted Putin in person in Russia and was asking him questions directly to his face, and then after that happened, he got pulled away and got punched right in the face. So like these questions we're presenting, it probably is against Lex's personal safety to ask some of these,
Yes.
like,
one thing I
and
think he
that
can ask though. There's one that I would like Lex to ask that I think he can. I think that this is something that Putin will answer. I don't know if he'll give a good answer for it. I don't think he will, but I think it's not something that'll get him hit. He can ask, okay, after this war is done and peace is signed, how are you going to reassure the Ukrainian people that you're not just going to go back in? How are you supposed to get them to trust you again? And that is a very Lex question to ask. It was not out of his
That's
wheelhouse.
not bad.
And I think it does put a huge onus onto Putin because let's be real, I think Putin's going to flub that one. I don't think he's going to give a real answer. And I think that people watching it are going to see that. And I think that'll be useful. Does that make sense?
yeah, that'd be clippable too. Just that part, yeah.
My prediction
After
would be
I don't think it's going to get him hit either. So
no, it might
yeah.
not.
Okay.
My prediction would be that
Well, like,
Putin's answer
Oh, well,
to
do you
this
have a
would be. Yeah, Sorry, which one of us?
No, it's
Dylan?
okay,
I want
go
to
ahead.
hear from Dylan because Dylan's
Yeah.
holding it in and he wants to explode. Go
He's
ahead.
bursting. He's
I
bursting.
feel like though Lex is a pretty fucking silly guy. I think he has a soul, right? I don't think Tucker has a soul. I think he has a soul, right? But I mean, like some of these questions were silly. Like for example, I remember the back and forth they had about Putin loving Russia, whether Putin loved Russia or not. It was probably the silliest part for me because what happened was like Lex introduces this idea or this framework, and the framework is that he believes that he could sit these two guys down, and this is like the basis of like his whole shtick right here. So this is pretty important framework. The framework is that he could sit them both down, and because they both love their countries, he thinks he could get them to settle something because even though he's not spoken to Putin at all, he feels
He has a
like
feeling.
he has a feeling.
dream.
No,
A
this
dream.
is true. He does
dream
believe this. This
that
is what
could
he
work out.
legitimately,
And then-
genuinely believes. Yes.
But then when confronted with the naivete of what he's believing and some dilemmas to it, and I'm not saying, by the way, that this is like an evil thing to believe. In fact, I wish I could believe this to some extent. Because it would definitely make it easier for me. It would give me a little bit more faith in humanity. But when Zelenskyy says, like, well, when you talk about loving one's country, is it love to take your nation's youth and throw them into the meat grinder? Is it love to suppress your press and suppress the poets and artists and people who are, and he's making this really heartfelt comment about like how you express love. And for me, I thought it was very beautiful because it seemed to be the difference between loving your country for what it is and loving for your country for what you imagine it to be. Loving this historical image. This is why he's always talking about Rurik the horse shitting in the middle of nowhere,
yeah.
because he loves this image of what Russia could be based on its historical, nationalistic, revanchist picture, right?
Mhm.
And so when you're talking about loving your country, Putin loves that. Putin doesn't love the babushka enough to stop their son from getting chopped up in Kursk. He doesn't love the store owner enough to help them bring down the price of eggs, which has gone through the roof, and butter, and milk, and every other type of household good. He loves the image of imperial Russia. He does not love the idea of the everyday Russian having to bleed for that picture to paint it. So for me, I thought it was a very intelligent answer. And he just says afterwards, like, well, Putin, I mean, I think he loves, I mean, just like Trump, travels around and sees all these places because Zelenskyy gave him credit, Putin does. And that shows that, he has, it just felt like a very weak way to respond and deal with, I think, the gravity of what has been said, because he just didn't know how to be flexible.
That's fair.
Actually, I think it's not a silly moment for Lex, because he actually was did exactly what I thought he would do. Because he said about the silliest bit of the interview by far, the love for their country. And like you said, Dylan, Zelensky said, like, how can you love your country when you throw 500,000 people to die for the land conquering shit, right? It's not like you're defending yourself, and you have to, right, to throw people at the front lines. No, you do it because you want more, and you are the biggest country on earth. How much fucking land do you need, right? And he brought up all those points about butchering his own people, right? Butchering Chechen people, about him, what even is Russia, right? What is his country? He considers Ukraine his country, like, but historically, and he thinks that he considers Belarus his fucking country, Armenia his fucking country, everything is fucking country of Putin, right? As long as he thinks he has some sort of claim to it, right? And all of that was intelligent and good. That was one of the best answers I think he gave. And then he ended it with the weakest point. Zelensky, I mean, he said, like, he doesn't even travel anywhere. He doesn't even like, he doesn't go to the front lines. He's not in Kursk, right, to see what his people are doing there. And it's not bad, but it's like the weakest link of his argument. And what does Lex address? The weakest link in his argument. He doesn't address. He's not dumb. I refuse it. He's not dumb. He knew exactly what he was doing. He couldn't address throwing 500,000 people to fucking die, 18-year-olds, right? He couldn't address that. That's not love. Everyone knows it's not fucking love, right? He couldn't address the butchering of Chechen people or minorities in Russia. It's not love. Everyone knows that, right? He couldn't address any of that, but he could address the weakest point. And he said, like, just because he doesn't travel to the front like you do, which I respect immensely, you do this, but he doesn't travel to the front doesn't mean he doesn't love his country. And then they started talking about Trump, that that the Trump doesn't and Zelensky was like, well, if there was like a huge disaster of some kind, in war is probably not happening, God bless, right, in your country, but if there was like a hurricane or an earthquake or some shit, like, Trump would probably go there, right?
Mhm.
And he was like, I believe so, at least, right? And Lex is intelligent. He addressed the only little silly thing he found in that answer without addressing literally anything else that Zelensky brought
Well,
up.
no, he
So-
did address that. He did address the rest of it. He just said war is hell. That
Yeah.
was his response to the rest of it.
And also he was wrong too,
doesn't
because
count.
he brought up Afghanistan and Iraq as if it's a comparison, but every president has visited Iraq and Afghanistan, Trump included, all of them, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, all of them. They've all gone to and he brought up the earthquakes and the wildfires and obviously the hurricanes, and the presidents go there and they spend time with the people there, whether it's for photo ops or whether they're trying to actually get some things done. At least they're there. At least they're present. And and Zelensky was trying to say Putin is doing none of that. Putin doesn't even leave his bunker. He doesn't go to the soldiers and see how they're doing, that he's sent to go die in Ukraine or in Kursk. He doesn't care. He's just sending them willy-nilly, and that's not love. That's not anything Lex is talking about.
He addressed the least egregious thing. Let's put it like that. Like he didn't address throwing people at the front. He didn't address butchering Chechen people. He didn't address any of that. And I love when Zelensky is like, he sends him to Ukraine, to Syria, to Africa, to fucking everywhere. And then he's like, to Moldova. Wait, that wasn't Putin.
Yeah, that wasn't Putin.
He was like, I'll give him that. He has enough scenes. I think that was a good moment. And Lex just didn't address literally any of that because there's nothing to address. There's nothing to address. It's fucking obvious, like that it's true. If that's love, then I don't need any. Okay, I know Zelensky is all about love, but if throwing half million people to die to take Ukraine is love, then what are we even talking about here? So it's absurd.
I have a question for Wick actually now. Yes. So you genuinely believe, and you believe that Lex believes everything that he's trying. You genuinely believe that.
Absolutely.
Will you contest that there's a little naivety in there at least with it then?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't agree with Lex on everything, but I can disagree with someone and still think they're coming from a place of honesty, a place of wanting to actually get things done. And Lex knows that people see him as naive. He does. And he accepts that.
Oh, really? He blocked me for that. But okay.
He does block people for it.
Okay.
You're not the only one.
Well, let me tell you a story about blocking, okay?
All right.
So it's been a while since some of you talked to me. You notice my teeth is fixed. Yeah, hooray. Great. Yeah, I used to have a
They look good. They look good. Congrats. I just noticed too.
Yes, but for the time it took longer than I would have liked because of other issues I won't get into. But people would constantly come and like, you stole that money. You took that money. Wick, you were a thief. You're a GoFundMe thief, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't block them, but when you have like 20, 30 people all coming to you, you're like, okay, come on, shut up. I don't want to even hear you.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I think you're being a little charitable.
Because I read this just yesterday. Jay from Kiev, I won't call him out too much, but he said, I think Zelensky should have thrown Lex out of a window.
Okay, Jay and Kiev is
How are you not going to block that? Let's be real.
Jay is wild. Yeah,
Jay is extreme.
Okay, how are you not gonna block that? I'm like, oh, you're.
No,
how did he block
that's
him? Right?
unfair. Like to compare this to what most people said back in the day about his Tucker appreciation. I never said they should throw.
I'm not saying that he's justified in blocking you. I'm just saying when you have a ton of people.
Wait a second. Wick,
right?
if he threw Lex out the window, if he threw him out the window, that would be him, I think, conceding to Lex. It'd be him engaging in Russian culture.
Fair.
True though. Wait, you know what? Actually, throwing him out of the window would be preparing him for the interview with Putin if he asks a wrong question.
But I'm just saying, like, when you have people coming at you like with the craziest stuff like that, sometimes there's a little collateral damage. Okay, I'm not saying I'm not here to. I can't defend his blocks. I'm not here to defend his blocks. I'm just saying.
I understand that. I get insane shit, like insane, absolutely, like insane things. Like I have like I hope Russians rape you to death like every day. Okay, I understand. Like I see that. Obviously, I won't engage with that. I will block that, right? But it wasn't what people were saying, especially back in the time. Right now, Ukrainians fucking hate the guy, obviously, right? But back then, people were actually quite amenable, like to him. Quite, they thought they saw him much more pleasantly back into 22, right? And the fact that he blocked people for literally saying that him believing in free speech and free journalism in Russia is naive. He blocked like most of people I know on Twitter, Ukrainians on Twitter, who maybe now they maybe now they're more ass mad and say like more unhinged shit about Lex, which I don't really think that's a good idea to threaten people with throwing them out of the windows or saying that it's a good idea to hurt them in any way. But other than that, it's just that I believe that he blocked like almost anyone Ukrainian or pro-Ukrainian, but he never did that to pro-Russian people because they never were aggressive towards him. I understand, right?
Sure.
But at the same time, like, is that really like a free speech guy that wants to represent two sides when you don't block the most heinous shit people
Yeah.
wrote in this comments about Zelensky, about him, even about him a fucking
Mhm.
Jew, like a lot of disgusting fucking shit never was blocked. And he blocked like Ukrainians, giving him a legitimate concern when he's platforming Tucker Carlson and saying he's a great journalist and he's a truth teller and all of that. Ukrainians don't have the right, you think, to say like, my man, you're like a actually like a given platform without any pushback to a guy who smirches our country and who in the hardest time of our lives wants to cut off aid to us and advocates for cutting aid to us, calls us thief, hold us like, I don't know, like calls us all sorts of things, right? And Ukrainians have a fucking right to say that to him, don't you think? And he doesn't think
Again,
so. It
I'm
seems.
not here to defend his blocks. It's not something I would do. I'm just saying that there's a lot of people, like, when you're being, I'm trying to humanize Lex. I'll
I
admit
don't
that.
need you
Right?
to. I
Saint
understand.
Lex.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we get it.
Saint Lex had a
Saint
dream.
Lex.
Well, I have a dream that one day Lex and Ukrainian
Oh,
Ana
boy.
will sit at a peace table, okay? And they'll hash out their differences and they will
Oh
make
my
peace, okay? I have
We
a
can
I
all.
don't
dream.
think
Hold
I
on.
don't think I can.
Today,
To
I'm
be honest
sitting
with
down
you,
with one of my biggest critics.
uh,
I
I
hope that hey, we have IT professionals and they can stand up against artillery and missiles, and we just use them instead. That was another point being made.
I will be honest with you. Like I never blocked him, obviously, and I like
Sure.
I like I don't have like a hatred towards him. But I would probably be I don't know. I don't think I can say with a straight face. And if he asked me if he said Putin loves his country to me, I would probably be much more emotionally vocal about that than
That's fair.
Zelensky was, obviously. But of course, I wouldn't mind. Like obviously, like I think there are plenty of things you can talk about with Lex because I don't consider him the same as Tucker Carlson, who fucked that bitch.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, obviously, I don't consider him on that level. But I might be wrong. I don't know. I might be wrong because of that. I'm free. I'm open to critique on that sort. But I also hold Lex to high standard because of his understanding of Russian culture, his ability to speak Russian, him being from Russia. I think anyone who knows anything about Russia and knows that I expect him to be more fact based and more knowledgeable and more in reality of this part of the world than I would an American who is not with Russian heritage, right? So someone like no, anyone, you all guys know stuff obviously, but like
Mhm.
just a regular like some American podcaster, I don't know, Joe Rogan or some shit, right? Like a guy like that, I wouldn't
Scott
really
Horton.
expect. Yeah, yeah. Hey, come on, don't bring this fool up. I'm still fighting off his an insane Russian squad coming for me. But anyhow, point is that I would Scott is a paid dude, obviously, but Joe Rogan I don't think is obvious, right? He's just dumb, okay? But I wouldn't expect him to know like Russian history or how Russian society functions. And my expectations are just lower. But with Lex, my expectations are higher, and maybe that's wrong. But I don't think it is because he himself speaks about his Russian heritage, his Ukrainian heritage. He speaks about his family, loving Putin. You know,
But
he
also,
speaks about
Lex has
yeah,
higher
yes.
Lex has higher. I'm just gonna say this because I'm not a big Lex fan, but I used to be a big Joe Rogan fan. I was a
Really?
huge Joe Rogan fan.
I've never
yes,
been
I
a
watch.
Joe Rogan
I
fan.
watch.
To
I
be
Where
watch.
did
honest,
that
I'm
come
not gonna
from?
lie.
I'm sorry. I'm watching every single episode. So, but when I saw Lex vaguely, right, I'm thinking of Lex as like someone that's speaking to intellectual people, or he's trying to
Oh yeah.
have higher level conversations. Whereas, like when I watched Joe Rogan, I was trying to hear the latest aliens, or like watching Elon Musk smoke weed and do random shit. Like I'm not listening to Joe Rogan for high quality like takes on things. Sometimes he would. Like I really appreciated that Bernie Sanders interview he did back in 2016ish, 15, and I got to hear more from Bernie. But even then, it was still not like lower, lighter, harder. Whereas Lex is like he has like scientists on, or he has like intellectuals on, or like people that want to have a higher level. So we expected better. We expected a little bit more, like maybe less naivety. Again, if that's the chair, that's what you're giving him. He's just a little naive, but he's genuine. A little bit more like
Sure.
awareness
I understand.
would have been
Yeah, a
great.
little less
I do
a
get it.
little
I
less
do get it.
kumbaya
Yeah,
at the very least.
I
Yeah,
do get it.
okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Especially since he is Russian. Okay, if he wasn't, I would be like, Americans. You know. Yeah, I
Mhm.
wouldn't be even mad. You know, I'd just be like, oh, Americans, cutesy American cute, privileged, stupid dog. Okay, I wouldn't be like very mad, but I am mad because I think he knows better and he should know better. And if he himself was like, I migrated like as a little fucking infant and I don't know like anything about Russia, that would be one thing. But he himself brings it up all the time that he has some sort of special connection. Even in this interview, he was like, my roots, my heritage is here in this part of the world. And if you make grand statements like that, and then the only thing you can bring up to the conversation is, I just want you and Putin, person who is responsible for hundred thousands of people dead in your country, right? To just sit down and have a chat and let the love prevail, let the love win. Excuse me, but no. I have high expectations of a man like Lex because he doesn't come to me as a retard, okay? He doesn't. Oh, sorry, I don't know if you can say that word here, but he doesn't come off to
Destiny
me as
does.
You can say it.
he
It's
does.
okay. It won't get me banned,
My
so you're
streamer,
good. Yeah.
my
Um,
streamer. Yeah. Anyhow, point is that that's just my general feeling. I might be wrong on that. I'm like, maybe my expectations should not be higher just because of his like heritage and his culture and the fact that he knows the language, but they are. And yeah, I don't know.
oh, fair enough. Gang, on that note, on the peace and love note, right? I think this has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed hearing your perspectives on this. I'll just say this to close. I'm glad it happened. I hope more happens. I hope there's more pro-Ukrainian content on Lex Fridman and other such podcasts. I hope that continues. I would like to see that happen. Gang, if you've enjoyed this content, and I know some of you have and some of you haven't, I get it. I see the comments in chat. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We do this all the time. Thank you for the super chats. I'll read them after these lovely individuals take their leave. But yeah, I want to give you, I have links to all their content in my YouTube description, but I want to give them a chance to have some last closing thoughts on the whole situation. We're going to start with Dylan. We're going to give Ana the last word here. Dylan, go ahead.
Hey, thanks.
Sure, I'll just say about the Lex Fridman stuff. I think Zelensky should do more media like this, not just mainstream media. I mean,
Yeah.
CNN's pulling like 77 in peak hours right now. So if you want to get to where the people are, you're gonna have to go to other places. And so trying to go on places like Joe Rogan, that is the move. Now you don't want to go to places that are set against you. Like, don't go on Tucker.
Right.
Tucker's not gonna be there. If you have a good conversation, that person's gonna set the stage against you. But going on shows like Joe Rogan's, going on shows like Lex Fridman's, going on, I don't care if it's the Haktua podcast, he needs to get his message out to the people, and the people are online. And I think, generally speaking, that the impact of this is positive. There was not anybody who watched this and was like, I like Zelensky before this, I no longer like Zelensky. So it could really only move people in a positive way. And from what I was seeing in the comments, and at the very least, lessened animosity. And I think that is a plus. As for final words, I'll just say the one thing I didn't get to say earlier because I wanted to make my more hardline pitch to Wick, and this will be my hardline pitch to Wick. These are the type of wars that people have to lose when you're talking about the Russians. Because these are the wars where you're basing it in the ideology of imperial expansion, that Russia is an empire, it has to act as an empire, and Ukraine is a pathway back into empire. And depending on how this war ends, how the Russian public views it as a victory, as a loss, that will affect their future behavior. It's not just a case of, well, if we set all the diplomatic, different diplomatic pieces in place, etc. We've done that before. But it's whether the Russians are going to be willing to put up with future invasions, think that this was rewarding enough due to the end result. And that's why I think they have to lose. Now, that doesn't mean they have to lose literally everything, but they have to walk away from this, and I'm sorry to say it, bitter and with a loss, that they feel that they did not
Bad taste in their mouths, yeah.
They have to come away with this with a bad taste in their mouth, because if they don't, then they're not going to come away with this with a Vietnam syndrome. They're going to come away from this thinking like, well, we should do this again because it worked. We need to deter a future invasion. And I think that rewarding this type of behavior is not going to be making the type of security policy in Europe that's going to stop invasions like this from happening again. We'll be making the same mistakes that we've made again after we've seen the bloodiest period in the war. So I really do think that, I understand that it might feel like We don't have the political landscape in place. But I mean, I believe that if you're and I hate to do the World War II comparisons, but if you're in 1938, if you're living in this historical moment, and there's a chance to try to cross that tightrope to try to, stop it before it gets out of control, you do it. You do it, and I think that we should attempt to do it, and I think we should try to work with
I
the
don't
incoming
disagree.
administration to try that.
I don't
because if we're going to
disagree.
lose, we should lose on our feet.
Absolutely, we should give it a try, but we should also prepare. What if we fail? And I think that both these aren't exclusive options here, but absolutely right. Well said, gang. Links in the description. Check him out. He's a good guy. Andrew Mercado, go ahead.
Well, war is hell. I have a dream that our alternative ideas can lead to a sustained peace. No, I think it goes back to Zelensky said in the interview, you can only talk to someone who's willing to listen. And right now, Russia's not willing to listen at all. Right. So we can have all the hours of conversation and dialogue, which is still great to have amongst like ourselves and like change ideas, especially reacting to this content. But Russia themselves, as the perpetrator of this invasion, is just not listening. I also recall a Zelensky interview a couple interviews ago where he said, this isn't a bar fight. It's not like, just two entities fighting outside of like the bar and like you're trying to stop the fight so that way people can get to their car safely or, like be out and about and not have to deal with a conflict outside between two people fighting. Like, and plus that would be irrelevant, right? It's not that. Okay, Ukraine is fighting for their independence. They're fighting for their existence, and it's very important to support that and to support sustain our support through this next administration. If you really feel empowered to help Ukraine, you can call your representatives. I mean, I do the best I can on my end to go to Congress. You can subscribe to my channel and bring ideas. That we go to DC. Dylan's there when he's in Maryland, when he's home, so it's cool to see Dylan. But yeah, just we hope for the best. Obviously, Trump administration's coming. That's really all we can do is from my end is domestically hope that we'll continue to sustain support Ukraine at a state level. But I'm going to continue to support, regardless of what happens at my level as best as I can. I had criticisms for Lex and how he conducted the interview, but like the fact that the interview exists is still, I think, a good, right. That's the takeaway. I think Zelensky did excellent in the interview, and thank you so much again, Wick, Dylan, Anna, for being on this panel and having me a part of it. I appreciate that. Mercado Media on YouTube.
Check him out, gang. Great guy. Appreciate you, man. It was good to hear your perspective on this. I really appreciate that. And certainly, last but not least, the star of the show, Ukrainian Ana. Go ahead.
Oh, come on. First of all, I learned that you can actually pick one color. It's mind-blowing, but it doesn't blip.
Which color are you picking?
This one. I like the
green. Let's go.
Yeah, but it's just a classic for me. I actually miss my green hair. But anyway, point is that apart from this amazing discovery, I really appreciate you for having me on, obviously, because I had a lot to say, I guess, about it. But also when it comes to the interview itself, I never was against it. I never was, some people mistake say that I don't want to like any one platform. That's not true. I wasn't even technically against Tucker Carlson's interview if it wasn't just him, nodding his head. If there was some sort of like pushback or anything like that, I would be okay with that. It's just how you conduct the interview. Basically, don't be Hassan interviewing a Houthi dude. Like that's my only demand. So don't talk about One Piece and things like that.
Just
talk
your favorite One Piece character.
Yeah. Just basically that's my point, right? And I appreciate that Lex at least did it and published it because, for example, Joe Rogan said that he doesn't want to be political. Because he doesn't want to have like Klitschko in, and he doesn't want like Kuleba. I think also said he want to go some with cigars and shit. Zelensky himself, I think, said he would go, but Judge Rogan said, I don't want to be political. I just want to shit on Ukraine with people who hate them. I just want to do that. That's not political, right? But I don't want to have people from Ukraine to defend themselves. So at the very least, right? Lex says he wants to represent both sides. I find that to be a little bit cringe, but at least he is true to his word in the sense that he interviewed Zelensky and wants to interview Putin now. So there's that. But as far as the interview itself, I expected the exact questions he asked with the love and everything. Like, okay, I expected that, but I think he gave Zelensky a big platform at least to speak to on, and also Zelensky himself did a better job than I even expected him to do. So overall, I would say that's a huge plus that this interview happened. I think, in my opinion, at least. And I appreciate that. I don't appreciate Lex in general doing his thing with Tucker Carlson, but at the very least, that's I can give credit here at least. And I wish there was more of that, but I don't think like Ukrainian war stories are that desirable, unfortunately. Like Dylan, I think actually said that. I still stole that from him, but he spoke about the Pierce interview I did. That I was like basically the only Ukrainian they had in like a quite a long time, or at all.
You did
even.
well on that, by the way,
So
but go ahead. Yeah.
Ever. I don't think they've
thank you.
ever had another one on.
No, I don't think they
Yeah.
have.
Some people said to me that they had Zelenskyy on actually, but I don't know if that's true. But I heard that, so maybe that's
Was it for a
maybe that's
round table or was it for like a one-on-one? Because there's a difference between.
101 maybe. I'm not sure. Like I
Yeah,
haven't.
I don't think they
found
have
it.
had a Ukrainian on a round table though.
Yeah,
Debate.
yeah. So I appreciate like and that's why the Ukrainian perspective is so very lacking in, and I hear Americans speak about us without us, which is unfortunately what Lex wants. It seems to happen without our any like input of Ukraine. Zelensky brought it up, by the way. He said I should be speaking with Trump first, not Trump speaking with Putin without us, right? So this is like something that we all get annoyed at in Eastern Europe in general, not just Ukraine, because we are all treated like as not to be dramatic, but a little bit like subhuman. So because of that, I just I just appreciate anyone honestly who wants to give like a platform to Ukrainian people, Lex included. So yeah, good job on that.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. Gang, tomorrow, it's a little bit of a switch up. We're going to have Harmony Ginger on. We're going to have Richard Witters, who worked with WotC for a while. And we're going to talk about, we're going to have others too. We're going to talk about colonialism in D&D. That's a little bit of a different topic, but if you want to tune into that, you are more than welcome. Gang, thank you again. Give all these people a wonderful follow. Again, links are
I
in the
have a
description.
Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a Twitter. If you
Yes.
can, I only have Twitter. Yeah, so you can link it somewhere.
It
yeah,
is in
that
my
would be
YouTube
cool.
description. People can click on that link and they
Yeah, thank you.
could go and give you a follow. And I hope you do, because she's worth following. Don't block her, gang. Okay? Don't block her. She's pretty cool, even
It's
when we
all right.
disagree. Okay, with that, that's the show. Wait, bye-bye,
Yeah,
everyone.
Awesome.
All right.
Bye bye.
See you guys. Take care.
See you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Wake.
Bye-bye. Was that fun, gang? Did you like it? Was it great? Was it fun? Was it good? I hope you did. Let's get to these super chats. $10 from the soy pill. If Wick was anti-war, he would have Peace Hammer 40K figurines on his shelf. How do people take this charlatan seriously? Thank you for the $10. I appreciate it. $5 from Levi. Great conversation. I thought so too. A lot of you old heads are like, why wasn't this a debate? Not everything has to be a debate. I wanted to get people's opinion on the interview, and these were the people I thought knew Ukraine best. And so I brought on the people I thought knew Ukraine best to have a talk about it and see what they thought. Don't worry, tomorrow will be Blood Sports. Wednesday, we're going to talk about American hegemony. That'll be Blood Sports. Thursday, we're talking about what it means to be a modern man. That's probably going to be Blood Sports, so you'll get that in spades. Don't worry, okay? We're still doing the debate panels, all that. I just wanted to try something a little different today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And if you haven't watched the Lex interview, I encourage you to do so. I have a link to it in my description. You can check it out. Look, I still like Lex. I think people don't understand him. But I have met people like Lex before. I understand Lex. I get it, right? I get what he's going for. You can disagree with him. That's fair. But I don't think, like, I've seen so many unhinged takes on Lex Fridman about how he's like this secret Putin spy. And the evidence that they have that he's a secret Putin spy is that his AI translated something to slap on the wrist when it should have been hit on the hands. And you're like, this is what you got? This is your argument? Really? Or they'll say something like, he asked to speak in Russian, right? That isn't. Yes, Zelensky speaks better Russian than he does English. That's just true. That's not him being a Putin spy. It's a lot of craziness out there. Don't be mind rotted, Okay? Understand Occam's razor. The most likely explanation is most likely the explanation. So, yeah. I do like Lex. I think I'm proud of him for having this interview. And I'm proud of how it went. I thought he did well. Can we get a close up on the teeth? Closest you're gonna get. So there you go. Yeah, like you have to understand Lex, his interview is going to be the same, right? And you may not like the style, that's fine, but he's always going to try to humanize the person he's talking to, no matter who it is. He's always going to give a positive interview. That's his goal, is to humanize and have a real quote unquote raw discussion. Okay? Anyway, what do we got going on? What do we got going on? Who we going? Who we going to? You guys want to raid into Prime Kai? I want to raid into Prime Kai. Say hi to Prime Kai for me. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow. No, it's going to be earlier than normal. Tomorrow's going to be 5 p.m. Eastern, okay? 5 p.m. Eastern. So check it out. And yeah. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.